Chapter 40-34. Bang bang bang. The deafening cracking sound shook the entire space. The ground shook violently. It could be said to be shaking the earth and mountains. Yi Qingluo was unable to maintain her balance. But what made her surprised was, no matter how much the space shook, the surrounding rock walls didn't have any signs of being shaken. Not even a bit of gravel. Seeing this scene, Yi Qingluo could almost confirm the guess in her heart. Her fingers tightened again. Immediately, a dazzling profound light enveloped her fist. A punch fell again. The entire space shook even more violently. The rumbling sound of collapsing echoed in her ears. The faint red deep-water true qi in the surroundings also began to swim uncontrollably in all directions. Wah wah wah. Luolas, what are you doing? Old man Song was still in a meditative state when he was suddenly flung out due to the shaking of the ground. Even if he was in a spiritual state, this fling he would still have some reaction. After he opened his eyes, the first feeling was the earth shaking and mountains shaking. His weak spiritual body was sent flying back and forth from the impact. In his ears, there was a deafening explosion sound. And in the sky full of red mist, Old Man Song saw Yi Qingluo punching a certain rock wall. The blossoming profound light was extremely dazzling. Old Man Song's spiritual body floated towards Yi Qingluo. As soon as it neared, a crack suddenly appeared in front of her. An intense aura surged out from the crack and assaulted them. Old Man Song was shaken by this sudden force and his entire spiritual body was flung out. What's going on? Old Man Song was hit by this force and struggled to support the rock wall to avoid the surging waves, and looked at Yi Qingluo until the force surging out of the crack stopped. Yi Qingluo then slowly approached the crack and said, "The real spirit gathering formation should be here." She pointed to the crack in front. In other words, the Azure Divine Weapon is here. Well, what? Old Man Song was stunned and couldn't understand Yi Qingluo's words. When I was absorbing the Azure Water True Qi just now, I noticed that the True Qi was orderly and continuously lingering around this area. Yi Qingluo spoke of her own guess. So, I followed the direction where the Azure Aqua Qi lingered and found this place. She slowly placed her hand on the gap. The light coming from the other side of the gap was blinding. It was as if everything was covered by a faint red mist. She could not see clearly what was happening on the other side. She closed her eyes slightly. The profound light burst forth once again. A dazzling profound glow burst out from Yi Qingluo's body. The vigorous power collided with the crack. As the earth shook and the mountains shook, the commotion became more and more intense. The crack suddenly split open. The gap between the cracks wasn't big, but it was just enough for Yi Qingluo alone to enter through this crack. Old Man Song listened to Yi Qingluo's explanation in a daze, and looked at her actions, until Yi Qingluo walked into the crevice. He still didn't understand what was going on. Seeing that Yi Qingluo had already entered the other end of the fissure, Old Man Song's spiritual body swayed and immediately floated to Yi Qingluo's side. "Last Luo, what is this place? You said the divine weapon is here. What's going on?" His voice just fell. The red mist in the surroundings surged over. Everything in front of them was dyed by the faint red mist. Chapter 40-35. From the looks of it, there wasn't much difference from the space they were in before. But Old Man Song's originally puzzled pupils suddenly contracted. The expression on his face, little by little, became solemn and dignified. Different. The vast aqua qi here was obviously different from the outside space. Previously, he kept saying how pure and rich the vast aqua qi was, and how it made people feel carefree. But, after feeling the vast aqua qi here, Old Man Song then knew what was called true purity rich. If I didn't guess wrongly, that space should be an illusion. Yi Qingluo explained, "Just now, when I found the real spirit gathering array, the entire space was shaking, but the surroundings didn't have a single piece of gravel falling. The earth shook, swaying endlessly, and all kinds of collapsing explosions could be heard. How could there not be a single piece of gravel? The only explanation was only that place was fake. Everything they saw was an illusion, an illusion. If it was a timid person." After feeling the earth shake, All kinds of collapses. Either they left like they were fleeing, or they were scared to death by the illusion. Yiqing Luo slowly raised her hand, the corners of her mouth slightly hooked. Old man Song look. Following Yiqing Luo's line of sight, only to see her raised hand. There was a ring on his fingertip, and there was a small flame that looked like it was burning. And on her wrist, that red silk chain also glowed with a red light. Between the vast aqua divine weapons. Response. Old man Song saw the changes of the two divine weapons, and a trace of surprise appeared on his face. Yes. Response. The vast aqua divine weapon had a response. This also meant. Here, there was indeed the existence of the vast aqua divine weapon. Old man Song was obviously excited. No wonder we couldn't find the whereabouts of the vast aqua divine weapon. It was hidden here. Yiqing Luo looked down at the vast aqua ring and vast aqua silk chain. Tightly, her fingertips stroked above. She lifted her feet and followed the response of the divine weapons. The mist around them continued to spread. If it wasn't for the fact that the color was very, very light, there really was a feeling of blood mist pervading. Because of the richness of the azure aqua chi, Yiqing Luo could only see clearly in front of her, within a range of about 20 meters. He followed his senses and walked forward for a long time. Layer after layer of deep-water true chi was pushed aside. A faintly discernible shadow gradually appeared in front of him. The reaction of the ring and the silk chain was also getting stronger. The divine artifact was right there. As Yiqing Luo got closer, in the faint red mist, that figure slowly appeared in front of Yiqing Luo. It was a tall stone wall. It was rectangular and radiated with a pure and holy velvet light. As she got closer, Yiqing Luo could see the exquisite murals carved on the stone walls. It was almost the same as the stone wall in the cave outside. It was a mural of the Divine Emperor. A mural of the vast water divine artifact. On top of that, there was a complicated and mysterious totem. The only difference was that this stone wall was a type of jade that was almost translucent and sparkling. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the sacred velvet light that shrouded the murals was not emitted by the stone walls. Instead, it was the exquisitely carved murals on the stone walls. Every line emitted a faint velvet glow. He just looked at her. It gave people a feeling of holiness and beauty. She would come to this place. It was precisely because of that stone wall in the cave that allowed her to enter the interior of the stone wall. Actually, this mural in front of her was the real stone wall, right? Chapter 40-36. The Emperor of Divine Emperors. Old man Song's voice was also unable to conceal his excitement. He widened his eyes and looked at the stone wall in front of him. There's the aura of the Divine Emperor on it. Yiqing Luo's vision looked up and down the stone wall. And the vast water god relic is also in this stone wall. The conditions for the formation of azure water true chi were divine artifacts and the blood of divine emperors. The divine weapon was inside the stone wall. The blood of the divine emperor must be in the stone wall. It was normal for the stone wall to have the aura of a divine emperor. Yiqing Luo's gaze finally fell onto the mural, that graceful human figure mural. Compared to the previous two stone walls, this mural was much more lifelike. From these murals, one could see that the emperor of the divine emperor was an outstanding celestial being. For some reason, when his eyes met the eyes of the divine emperor carved on the mural, Lin Mingya's heart trembled. Yiqing Luo's heart suddenly jolted. It was as if he had been violently shaken by something. His heart couldn't stop beating wildly. The pair of eyes on the mural was clearly carved out. But it gave Yiqing Luo a feeling that she was looking into his eyes. That pair of eyes seemed to be alive. It was sending her some kind of message. It also felt like it was calling out to her. Little girl? Little girl. Beside his ear, old man Song's somewhat indistinct voice called out. She couldn't hear it clearly. His eyes reflected the mural in front of him. Suddenly, Yiqing Luo's arm was abruptly burned by something. A burning sensation spread across her arm. She was in pain, and her dazed eyes instantly regained their brightness. Lowering her eyes, she looked at the scorching area. It was the azure dew bracelet. It was releasing energy. Circles of light that resembled electric currents jumped about in excitement. Old Song, She blinked her eyes. She didn't quite understand why the Azure Dew bracelet had gone out of control. At some unknown time, Old Man Song had burrowed into the Azure Dew bracelet. In her mind, Old Man Song's voice came with a sigh of relief. You little girl, what happened just now? It's like you've lost your soul. No matter how I call you, you won't respond. Just now? Yiqing Luo frowned as she tried to recall what had happened earlier. Wasn't it just standing here and looking at the murals? Did Old Man Song call her? There seemed to be. It was just that he was too engrossed in looking at the murals and didn't pay attention to it. Yiqing Luo thought in this way. Suddenly his eyes widened. Her eyes, which were as bright as stars, overflowed with shock. No, that's not right. No matter how entranced she was by the murals, she would never ignore Old Man Song. Furthermore, he wouldn't be uncertain if Old Man Song had called out to her. Old Man Song. Yiqing Luo's voice sounded a little tense. Old Song was still in the Azure Dew bracelet. What's wrong? Yiqing Luo tightened her fingers. This mural seems to be able to seduce people's hearts. Just now, I seem to have lost my consciousness because of the Emperor of Gods on this mural. Old Man Song was slightly startled and didn't speak for a long time. He sensed that something was wrong with Yiqing Luo. Thus, he had specially returned to the Azure Dew bracelet. Making use of the soul contract between the Azure Dew bracelet and Yiqing Luo, he awakened her from the depths of her soul. But unexpectedly, there was something wrong with her just now. It was because of the murals on the stone walls. Yiqing Luo didn't urge Old Man Song to answer. After a moment of silence, Old Man Song slowly came out from the Azure Dew bracelet. On his face was a kind of very complicated, very strange expression. Chapter 40-37. Just now, what did you see on the stone wall? Old Man Song asked. Then he thought of something and added, what I'm referring to is, what do you think you saw after you lost consciousness? Yiqing Luo knitted her brows tightly, her mind constantly searching for the memories just now. But she felt that the memory was exceptionally blurry. She couldn't even remember the details of the mural clearly. She pursed her lips and thought for a while. I was just studying the mural, wanting to know where to get the exact location of the vast water artifact. But later, speaking to this point, Yiqing Luo stopped. She thought for a long time. But in her memory, it was all hazy and blurry. She scratched her head. In her mind, a pair suddenly appeared, jet black like the stars in the night, resplendent glass-like eyes. Quiet and gentle, elegant and gentle. It seemed to contain indescribable, inexhaustible deep feelings. That pair of eyes flashed across her mind for a moment. Yiqing Luo suddenly felt an inexplicable shock in her body and mind. She licked her lips and answered. Yes, I just saw the eyes on the mural. It's the eyes. It was that pair of eyes that seemed to be able to hook people's souls. Let her only meet those eyes for a moment. Then she was a little absent-minded. This kind of situation rarely appeared. With the wisdom of 2 lifetimes, very few people could shake her willpower. That pair of eyes seemed to really exist on the stone wall. Eyes. After Old Man Song heard Yiqing Luo's answer, the expression on his face became more and more solemn. He stared at Yiqing Luo for a long time. Suddenly, his figure floated and his spiritual body was close to the stone wall. His height was exactly the same as that pair of eyes on the stone wall. He only looked for a few breaths. Old Man Song quickly retracted his gaze and bowed towards the direction of the mural, as if apologizing for his rude behavior. After doing all this, Old Man Song looked at Yiqing Luo. Last Luo, do you believe me? Yiqing Luo's gaze wandered between the stone wall and Old Man Song, vaguely understanding something. She didn't hesitate and nodded. I do. Old Man Song was the first person she truly trusted since she came to this strange world. She had said it countless times. Old Man Song was her elder. Since he chose to live and die together with Old Man Song, how could she not believe him? Even though she was very clear in her heart that Old Man Song had concealed many things from her. Listening to Yiqing Luo's reply, the expression on Old Man Song's face changed slightly. Then he continued in a serious and solemn voice, "Drip your blood on these eyes." Yiqing Luo was stunned for a moment before she understood Old Man Song's meaning. You're saying the stone wall's eye is the key to unlocking this spirit-gathering array? Yes. Old Man Song replied. You reacted to the pair of eyes on the mural, which means that the power hidden within those eyes is extremely great. Yiqing Luo nodded in understanding. He raised his hand without the slightest hesitation. The devouring flame fan swept past his fingertips. 2 drops of blood dripped onto the pair of eyes in the mural. When he dripped his blood onto the pair of eyes, his eyes trembled. Yiqing Luo wanted to look at that pair of eyes to ascertain the position of the eyes. And this one glance, Yiqing Luo suddenly felt a trembling feeling assaulting her. Immediately after, there was a sharp pain in her fingers. His finger, which was pressed against the stone wall, felt as if it had been bitten by something. Chapter 40:38. She hadn't had the time to see what was going on with the stone wall. She had just raised her head. What greeted him was the surging red mist. It wasn't the light mist of the azure water chi, but it was so thick that apart from a patch of red, it was still a patch of red mist. In a split second, it had already blurred her eyes. And then, she clearly felt that the red mist had completely wrapped her up. There was a burning feeling. She wanted to open her eyes and struggle, but her body seemed to be bound by an unknown force. She couldn't move at all. At this moment, Old Man Song, who was standing beside the stone wall, saw everything in front of him clearly. He personally saw the girl dripping blood onto the stone wall's eyes. He personally saw the eyes on the stone wall surging with thick red mist and enveloping Yiqing Luo. He didn't stop her. He even took a few steps back. His eyes were tightly staring at the figure in the red mist. On his face, there was a worried expression and he was trying his best to restrain himself. Yiqing Luo's eyes were tightly shut. She didn't know how long the feeling of being bound had lasted. She only knew. She tried to use her mental power to struggle, and caused her body to fall into a state of fatigue. The red mist that lingered around her gradually dissipated. The feeling of being bound also gradually subsided. Her body was gently placed on the ground by the red mist. Her body had just touched the ground. Her limbs could just move. Yiqing Luo bounced back almost instantly and flipped up from the ground. This movement also caused her head to feel a sharp pain, as if it was being torn apart. Her mental power had been used up too much, exceeding the body's load, reminding her to rest. Yiqing Luo suppressed the pain in her head and slowly stood up, quickly looking around vigilantly. The scene in front of her. But it made Yiqing Luo stunned. In front of her, it wasn't the kind of space that was completely enveloped by the azure water chi, but it was a huge and magnificent graveyard that was above the void. Yes, graveyard. The place where she was standing was the entrance to the graveyard. The entrance that was suspended in midair. Surrounding this target was a sky that was almost purplish-black in color. It was as if a purplish-black ink was used to dye the entire sky. It set off this gloomy and treacherous purplish-black color in all directions. Yiqing Luo looked around and all she could see was this color. It was very depressing. Yiqing Luo took a few steps forward. He stuck his head out to look at the bottom of the graveyard. It was also a deep purplish-black color. At a glance, large patches of purplish-black seemed to distort. Yiqing Luo paid careful attention. These large patches of purplish-black were not fixed. Instead, they were like clouds, drifting slowly one by one. When he looked down, occasionally, the peaks of a few mountains could be seen. Yiqing Luo retracted her line of sight and shifted her gaze to the front. This huge and hair-raising graveyard. This graveyard was not as dark and gloomy as he had imagined, filled with all kinds of bones. On the contrary, it looked like an old castle. In a castle under the treacherous, gloomy purplish-black sky. That stone wall. Why did it bring her to this graveyard? Could it be the third azure water divine artifact? Was it in this graveyard? Yiqing Luo slowly walked towards the cemetery. Raising his hand, he tried to push open the stone gate at the entrance of the graveyard. But no matter how hard she tried, the stone door remained motionless. She frowned, not understanding the situation in front of her. Old Man Song made her use her fresh blood to open the enchantment on the stone wall. Chapter 40:39. Why was it that she couldn't even enter this tomb now? Or perhaps, what other operations were needed to open the tomb entrance stone door? Yiqing Luo walked around the stone door and sized it up. She even used her hands to touch everywhere to see if there were any mechanisms. But after fumbling around for a while, nothing was found. This made Yiqing Luo very puzzled. She stopped her hand movements and sat down leaning against the stone door. She raised her head and carefully scanned every inch of the stone door. After that, she looked at the surroundings of the stone door. Around the stone door, there were complicated carvings. The entire tomb, every place, seemed to be meticulously piled up and carved. This tomb was really quite big. At one glance, she couldn't see the outline of the tomb, nor could she see the whole tomb. Such a huge tomb, and it was suspended in midair. Yiqing Luo was very curious. How on earth was this tomb supported, stabilized in midair? All kinds of questions lingered in Yiqing Luo's heart. She sat for a while. Her mind couldn't think of any useful information. She must think of a way to get the third divine relic as soon as possible and leave the stone wall. She couldn't keep wasting time here. The longer the time dragged, the more worried Moxian would be. Everyone would also be worried about her and upset. Yiqing Luo stretched her waist and was preparing to stand up again to continue looking for the azure water divine relic. Her finger suddenly felt a tingling. She raised her hand to take a look. The cut on her finger, probably because she had knocked against the tomb's stone door, the wound had split open again. She touched her finger, but didn't put it to heart. But she didn't discover. When her finger knocked against the stone door, blood gushed out and fell on the stone door. But in the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the stone door. When Yiqing Luo stood up, the azure water ring and azure water chain suddenly produced a huge reaction. It was in her hand, constantly vibrating. Even her hand followed the vibration. The azure water divine relic's reaction made Yiqing Luo stunned. She looked at her hand and the azure water ring and silk chain that were releasing energy. Her eyes suddenly lit up. This was the reaction between the divine relic. Through this reaction, she could quickly find the third azure water divine relic. Yiqing Luo immediately concentrated, maintaining a spiritual connection with the azure dew ring and the silk chain that were vibrating in her hands. Suddenly, her feet felt light. His feet stepped on air. Then he activated the falling mode. However, the fall this time was not as long as before. In the blink of an eye, she fell to the ground. The surrounding scenery transformed into a space filled with white fog. What attracted Yiqing Luo's attention was the stone bench in the middle of the space, which was flickering with a faint red glow. The light was indeed very weak, but in this vast expanse of whiteness, no matter how weak that red light was, it was extremely eye-catching. Yiqing Luo walked over. The closer they got, the light grew brighter. And the reaction of the two divine artifacts in his hands was also greater. Yiqing Luo only stopped when she was 3 steps away from the stone bench. The white jade bench was smooth and exuded a bit of cold air. Placed atop the stone bench was a palm-sized jade pendant. The jade pendant was in the shape of a cherry blossom, decorated with a red thread similar to the azure water chain. The jade pendant was a transparent red color, like a red watery light, rippled on the jade pendant. Every petal was extremely exquisite. Traces of red light emitted out. Chapter 40. Yiqing Luo didn't head up immediately to pick up that piece of jade pendant. The third piece of god relic was hidden too deeply. Layers and layers of traps. It was obvious that it didn't want anyone to know the whereabouts of this piece of jade pendant. Yiqing Luo naturally wouldn't be so silly as to leave. The stone stool which the jade pendant was placed on was emitting an intimidating pressure. If she went forward rashly, she would probably be attacked by the aura surrounding the stone stool. She pursed her lips tightly as she looked down at the ring and silk chain in her hands. These 2 pieces of god relic kept on vibrating, as though it was trying to drag her towards the direction of the jade pendant. Yiqing Luo raised her hand and suppressed the agitation of the god relic. She raised her eyes slightly as she looked at the jade pendant which kept on tempting her. She remembered. Just like when she was battling with the King of Darkness. The King of Darkness had once told her. Her divine phoenix profound heart jade was a radar to locate the god relic. and the key to get the vast aqua divine relic. If she used the divine phoenix profound heart jade's energy, would she be able to get the jade pendant? This thought arose in Yiqing Luo's heart and made her eager to try. She didn't have the time to continue delaying. The blood-colored fog which lingered in the surroundings became thicker and thicker. It almost swallowed her whole. Ever since she fell into the stone wall during the battle with the King of Darkness, the scenery she saw kept on changing. She wasn't sure if the scenery and environment in front of her was real or fake. She wasn't sure if she would change into another environment in the next moment. Which meant the third vast aqua divine relic had just passed by. Yiqing Luo didn't hesitate as her slender fingers slowly pressed on her heart. She closed her eyes. She started to release the divine phoenix profound heart jade's energy. The alluring red glow slowly seeped into her palm, which was at her heart. Following that, the glow slowly grew bigger. It started to stretch out towards the stone stool, which was 3 steps away. Which was the moment when Yiqing Luo released the divine phoenix profound heart jade's energy. The thick red mist in the surroundings suddenly rose into the air. It was actually heading towards Yiqing Luo's divine phoenix profound heart jade's energy, directly intertwined with that energy. When the two forces collided, Lin Fan's eyes widened. Yiqing Luo suddenly opened her eyes. An indescribable emotion surged in his heart. What kind of feeling was that? It was as if the divine phoenix profound heart jade that had been released from her body had found its home. It had found the feeling of home. The surging red mist was completely compatible with the power of the divine phoenix profound heart jade. As they intertwined with each other, they fused together in a short moment. Yiqing Luo had also discovered it. The stone bench that originally held the jade pendant was shrouded in layers of red mist, and it actually merged with the divine phoenix profound heart jade. The power of the divine phoenix profound heart jade was connected to her heart, and also to her soul. When the two powers fused, Yiqing Luo suddenly felt a huge surge of energy surging into her body. It was as if her body was suddenly stuffed with something. In an instant, he felt a sharp pain from the swelling. Yiqing Luo let out a muffled groan as her 5 fingers clasped the front of her chest. She furrowed her brows. Suppressing the weird feeling in his body, he raised his head to look at the jade pendant. The jade pendant was no longer shrouded in red mist. At this moment, it appeared even more sparkling and translucent. The red glow that flowed on the petals was extremely demonic. Following Yiqing Luo's breathing. Chapter 40-41. You can take it. These 4 words surfaced in Yiqing Luo's mind, just as she was about to take a step closer to the jade pendant. That jade pendant which was lying quietly on the stone bench suddenly flew up. This movement. The cherry blossom-like jade pendant turned into blossoming flower petals as it sprinkled downwards. But after a moment, Yiqing Luo's surroundings were already covered with cherry blossom rain. Yes, cherry blossom rain. The kind of cherry blossom rain which was extremely Chinibyu. It covered the sky and earth as it lingered downwards. And what made Yiqing Luo most surprised was every petal of the falling cherry blossom rain seemed to be covered in a red, watery light, and ripples spread out in the air. What situation was this? How did the jade pendant turn into a flower petal rain? Was this the Azure Dew Jade's special ability? Yiqing Luo looked at the falling cherry blossom rain in a daze. Suddenly, the extremely Chinibyu cherry blossom rain turned into a ray of red light as it instantly flowed into her body. Her eyes widened as her expression became even more dazed. But, following that, there was no time for her to be dazed. The moment that Chinibyu red light flowed into her body, the thick red mist in the surroundings suddenly began to collapse. The smooth and holy stone bench suddenly exploded into pieces. Yiqing Luo retreated in shock. Her body had just moved. That body which was originally filled with energy, seemed to have something stirring fiercely in her body. Her limbs and bones were instantly rushed into by this huge force. Buzz! His mind shook violently, and a buzzing sound rang out continuously. She cried out, ah, as her petite body swayed and she couldn't stand steadily as she fell onto the ground. This was no longer a feeling that could be described as pain. It was as if every tendon in her body was forcefully torn apart, and then stuffed with something and then stitched up again. And when the stirring feeling came, every part of her body felt like it was being pricked by needles. It was so painful that she couldn't wait to cut off all her tendons and meridians to release that swelling pain. She fell onto the ground as her body curled up. Her mouth kept making low and painful moans. If this went on, her body might not be able to withstand the pressure and explode to death. Yiqing Luo bit her lower lip as she maintained her consciousness. She must not lose herself in the pain. Once her consciousness was devoured, she might never be able to open her eyes again. Little girl Luo, little girl Luo. Suddenly, several breaths of time passed by his ears. Those cries caused her to open her eyes despite the pain. Purplish black. A patch of purplish black. It was the sky of the graveyard. Yiqing Luo's breathing tightened as her gaze wandered around. There was indeed no longer a thick red mist in all directions. Instead, it was an oppressive purplish-black color. It was as if her eyes were going to be dyed purplish-black. She returned to the graveyard from the place where the artifact was placed. Perhaps it was because of the sudden change in the scene before him. The intense pain in Yiqing Luo's body stopped the teasing. It also gave her a moment to catch her breath. However, it was only for a moment. That kind of power surged through her limbs and bones. It was powerful and majestic, filling every single one of her tendons and squeezing every inch of her body. His vision became blurry and hazy again. In a trance, she vaguely saw a complicated totem on the stone door of the entrance of the cemetery. It was very familiar, like she had seen it somewhere before. Yiqing Luo wanted to identify it seriously. Chapter 40-42. Girl Luo. Girl Luo. At the same time, those calls sounded again. She opened her eyes. What entered his eyes was Old Man Song's worried face. He floated above her, floating back and forth, his mouth constantly muttering, calling out to her. Seeing Yiqing Luo open her eyes, Old Man Song was wild with joy as he swooped down and stopped beside Yiqing Luo. Luo lass. Yiqing Luo's eyelashes fluttered as her breathing stagnated for a moment. Girl Luo, what's wrong? What happened? Old Man Song saw that Yiqing Luo didn't respond for a long time, and was extremely worried. Yiqing Luo wanted to respond, but as soon as he opened his mouth, the powerful energy surging in her body caused her face to turn pale. Her entire delicate body curled up a little. It was as if some kind of power was about to explode from her body. The pain was unbearable. Hear her muffled groan of pain. Old Man Song became more and more anxious. He wanted to touch her, but the spirit body passed through her body. He was so anxious that his wrinkled face was scrunched up. But Yiqing Luo's current state made her unable to answer him. Old Man Song could only return to the Azure Dew bracelet and use it to check on Yiqing Luo's body. With this investigation, Old Man Song was stunned. Little Luo, what's going on? Inside your body? How could it? Within Yiqing Luo's body, her limbs and bones, her internal organs, every meridian was filled with a thick and majestic energy. Squeezed into Yiqing Luo's body, there was not a single gap. These energies continuously intertwined with the power of the divine phoenix profound heart jade, stirring. Under such circumstances, Yiqing Luo could still maintain her consciousness? Just how strong was his willpower? Even if it was him, he wouldn't dare to say that he could endure such inhumane torture. Old Man Song was filled with shock and heartache. Girl, just how much energy did you absorb? Old Man Song used the Azure Dew bracelet and began to divide the energy within Yiqing Luo's body. But by doing this, it only slightly reduced Yiqing Luo's pain. He had to first suppress the restless power in her body. After that, he would slowly absorb it. But they were still trapped in this stone wall. How could they help Luo Yu suppress her power? For the first time, Old Man Song felt so powerless. At this moment, Old Man Song only heard a pung explosion. All of a sudden, a crack appeared above the space that was filled with dark water true qi. It was as if someone had torn a rift out of thin air. Then, a purple figure descended from the sky like a god. His sleeves moved slightly. The young girl who was curling up in pain on the ground was pulled into his arms. The purple-robed man stared at the person in his arms. The girl's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Her lips were pale, but her face was abnormally flushed. The aura emanating from his body was so chaotic that it seemed like a volcano would erupt at any moment. The man's handsome face darkened. His peach blossom eyes narrowed. The corners of his eyes were cold and bloodthirsty. Lord Dizun. Old Man Song's face lit up with joy when he saw who it was. The spiritual body immediately drilled out of the azure dew bracelet. However, the man didn't even give him a look, as he kept staring at Yiqing Luo. Chapter 40-43. If the power within Luolas continues to riot. Luolas is very likely. Possibly. At this point, Old Man Song pursed his lips and couldn't continue. Dmo Xian's face was cold as his gaze suddenly shifted towards Old Man Song. He didn't seem to move, but he waved his sleeves, like a purple flowing cloud rolling over and over. A tyrannical profound light swept up a horrifying chi wave, as it headed straight towards Old Man Song. Old Man Song's face congealed slightly. He could dodge but he didn't. He allowed that chi wave to hit his body. Bang! Old Man Song's spirit body swayed from the hit. The lingering white light on his body also dissipated like smoke. His spirit body also became much thinner. But Old Man Song's expression didn't change. He also didn't complain that his spirit body's power had been reduced by a third. If there's a next time, no matter how much Luo Air respects you, this lord will make your soul scatter. Dmo Xian said coldly. His voice seemed to be condensed with frost. So cold that it made one's heart go cold. Old Man Song lowered his head slightly. His voice was obviously a bit weak. This matter, it's my fault. I miscalculated the absorption rate of the Divine Phoenix Profound Jade, causing Luolas to become like this. He should bear Dmo Xian's palm. It was indeed him who made Yiqing Luo use her own blood to open the passage in the stone wall and enter the enchantment. Only Yiqing Luo could enter this enchantment. Only Yiqing Luo could get the third divine weapon. Of course, his goal wasn't just to let Yiqing Luo get the third divine weapon. But this place. Everything here was beneficial to Yiqing Luo. Almost certainly. He could use this opportunity to let Yiqing Luo advance to the profound grade. But he miscalculated the greed of the Divine Phoenix Profound Jade. It had actually absorbed so much of the vast water chi, plus the power of the divine weapon entering the body. It made Yiqing Luo's body completely unable to bear this burden. Old Man Song's guilty tone made Dmo Xian frown slightly. He stared at Old Man Song for a moment before quickly retracting his gaze and spitting out coldly. Scram! If it wasn't for the fact that Old Man Song was the object of Yiqing Luo's respect, just based on the fact that Old Man Song injured his little Luo heir, even if he was scared out of his wits, he would not be able to vent his anger. Old Man Song sensed Dmo Xian's rage, but didn't have any intention of returning to the azure dew bracelet. Instead, he looked worriedly at the person in his arms. Luolas Shi. Perhaps it was the mention of Yiqing Luo's name. Curled up in Dmo Xian's arms, Yiqing Luo, who was in so much pain that her body couldn't stop trembling, suddenly clutched tightly onto Dmo Xian's lapel as her painful breathing became hurried. Dmo Xian lowered his gaze. He looked at the girl's face, which was becoming more and more abnormally red. Even his body began to turn red. She was drenched in cold sweat and her robe was soaked. This was a sign that the energy in his body was unable to calm down, and was about to erupt. Yiqing Luo's body. He couldn't hold on any longer. However, even though the person in his arms was in so much pain, her hands were clutching his clothes tightly. It was as if he was trying to stop his attitude towards Old Man Song. Dmo Xian held her hand tightly, looking at the person in his arms who was in pain. The frost in the depths of his obsidian eyes deepened. In the end, his gaze only coldly swept over Old Man Song in an extremely shallow and indifferent manner. His imposing manner was restrained by a lot. Ah Xian. Chapter 40-44. What entered her nostrils was the man's elegant sandalwood scent. The familiar smell, the warm broad chest, made her tense nerves relax in an instant. Following that, her consciousness began to dissipate. The powerful and awe-inspiring majestic power was like the rolling waves in her body. The sweat on her forehead due to the severe pain flowed down her cheeks. Her gorgeous face was extremely pale. Her brows were tightly knitted together. Her face was full of pain. Looking at such a painful young lady, Emotien's heart was also in pain. He bowed his head. The shadow blocked the worry in his dark eyes. His thin lips were printed on the young lady's lips, which were tightly bitten because of the pain. The tip of his tongue moved slightly. He picked up the young lady's self-harming behavior. He could vaguely taste the bloody smell from the young lady's lips. Emotien's pupils shrank slightly. Deep in his eyes, there was some heartache. The moment he kissed the young lady, Emotien could clearly feel, from the young lady's mouth, there was a powerful force. He sighed softly. The tip of his tongue moved again. A drop of blood, along the tip of the tongue, fell into Yi Qingluo's mouth. Faintly, there was a glimmer. The moment the man's blood, along Yi Qingluo's throat, slid into her body, it was like when the raging fire was burning, it was covered with a layer of coldness, relieving all her discomfort. It was like a warm spring, seeping into her limbs and bones, gently brushing over every corner of her body. In an instant, it suppressed the surging power in her body. That strand, squeezing in Yi Qingluo's body, tendons and other places, slowly followed the power brought by that drop of blood, and calmed down. Not like the squeezing, fighting and entanglement earlier, but extremely smoothly spread out in Yi Qingluo's body. Yi Qingluo's fingers, which were holding Emotien's clothes, slowly loosened. Her half-hazy eyes blinked slightly. The cold sweat on her eyelashes was blinked off, clearly met with the man's doting and warm eyes. "Don't be anxious," Emotien spoke in a gentle voice, as if the warmth seeped into Yi Qingluo's heart. Her ear was pressed against the man's chest. Listening to the sound of his heartbeat made one feel at ease. "Follow your most direct reaction. I believe Lil Luo, or can definitely do it." The man's gentle voice was very close. She didn't understand the meaning of Emotien's words. Before he could ask, suddenly, her delicate body shook violently. Dense and majestic dark force was circulating rapidly in his body. All the muscles and bones in his body were swept away. There were huge waves surging within Yi Qingluo's body, slapping against it continuously. The sudden fluctuation of energy, it didn't make her feel the unbearable pain she had just now. Instead, it was as if something was colliding, slapping, and sweeping away again and again. Slowly, the door opened. The power released by the divine phoenix profound heart jade began to slowly absorb the dark force that collided with it. Wave after wave. Round and round. After an unknown amount of time. Finally, in Yi Qingluo's mind, no, more accurately from head to toe, a muffled boom came from the air around him. Yi Qingluo's vibrating dark force suddenly dispersed in all directions. It was like a magnificent red sunset, rippling in the air. Her aura gradually changed. The fluctuation of the profound grade was also surging continuously. Sage profound 5th grade, Sage profound 6th grade. The profound grade's aura was still surging. Chapter 40-45. If there were other people around, they would definitely be scared out of their wits by the scene in front of them. Perhaps, if the World Mercenary Group's brothers or familiar elders saw this, they would be shocked. For example, Old Man Song, who was floating by the side, was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped to the ground. He knew how abnormal Yi Qingluo was. But he didn't expect Yi Qingluo to be so abnormal. Abnormal to the extent that it couldn't even be described. If it was previously in Nirvana realm, Yi Qingluo's various kinds of advancement made everyone excited. But now in the Earth realm, the higher the profound grade, the harder it was to advance. Especially, the profound grade of the virtuous profound grade. It was equivalent to the chance of advancement, from 80% to 20%. Among these 20%, those who could advance successfully might have spent hundreds of years and expended huge amounts of resources. But how long had it been since Yi Qingluo advanced to virtuous profound 4th grade? Now she had advanced again. And it was another advancement. This was comparable to the speed of lightning. Old Man Song expressed that every time he saw Last Luo's advancement, he would be shocked. Probably the next time, he would be numb. Seeing that Yi Qingluo was obviously out of danger, Old Man Song raised his hand and pressed on his scattered spiritual body, as he sighed helplessly. His figure swayed. The spiritual body returned to the azure dew bracelet. The advancement of profound energy was still lingering. Yi Qingluo's energy had completely merged with the divine phoenix profound heart jade, and could be released anytime and anywhere. After the advancement, the energy gradually settled down. Yi Qingluo only felt comfortable. After she opened her eyes, in front of her was a hazy fog. A bundle of warmth enveloped her body. She blinked her eyes to clear her mind. She could see clearly that she was completely naked, soaking in a hot spring. The elegant floral fragrance mixed with a faint medicinal fragrance entered her nose. Yi Qingluo raised her hand and touched the water surface. Where was this place? Did Dmo bring her here? She seemed to remember. Before the advancement, she saw Dmo, and because Dmo came in time, only then was she able to suppress the violent energy in her body. Then she was able to advance. It seemed. Was it because of a drop of his blood? She was still pondering. Suddenly, he felt something warm beside his ear. A pair of broad and thick palms landed on her shoulders. In an instant, his skin felt as if it had been set on fire, and it was burning hot. You're finally awake. The man's low and hoarse voice was as mellow as fine wine. In this warm and comfortable hot spring, his voice was even more intoxicating. Yi Qingluo didn't move as she held the man's arm and leaned back. The fog obscured the unadorned face, which was still exceedingly beautiful. Dmo's figure pressed down slightly as his lips curled into a smile. This time's advancement seems to be rather strenuous for you. Yi Qingluo raised her hand and blocked in front of her. She also blocked the man's kiss. The water droplets splashed onto Dmo's body. The man's thin lips were also imprinted on her palm. There was a slight burning sensation. Dmo didn't mind as he raised his hand and caught the little hand that he had kissed. Then he brought it to his lips and kissed it. His thin lips curled into a smile with some unclear meaning. Do you know how long you took to advance this time? Yi Qingluo felt a little itchy and her delicate body was also trembling slightly because of the man's indistinct teasing. Somehow, she felt that there was an inexplicable displeasure in the man's tone. Chapter 40-46. Yi Qingluo wanted to look back at Dmo's expression, but the man's hands were still on her shoulders. She couldn't move her body. She pursed her pink lips and lifted her hand from the hot spring. Her hand was stained with water droplets and held the man's big palm. The girl's clear voice was very sweet. Thank you, Xian, for staying by my side during my advancement. Dmo chuckled as he leaned forward a little. Almost his entire face was pillowed on her bare shoulder. His warm breath sprayed on her skin. The man's deep voice was magnetic and alluring. I've stayed by your side for 3 days and just a word of thanks and you're going to dismiss me? Following his words, his dark eyes were filled with a pitch-black darkness. Slightly tilting his eyes, his lips were on the girl's earlobe. And at the same time, the girl was tickled by the man's hair and looked at him sideways. His lips were on hers. The girl's fragrance was mixed with the fragrance of medicine, which was particularly tempting. Dmo's deep as ink eyes dimmed. And Yi Qingluo. At the moment when their lips touched, she only felt the temperature of the hot spring suddenly rose. She was just about to move away, but her head was clasped by the man's big palm. The overbearing kiss fell on her lips fiercely. From this angle, Yi Qingluo felt that the man's eyes were getting more and more charming. But Dmo quickly moved his lips away. His handsome and elegant face was faintly tainted with a trace of bewitching evil charm. His slender fingers brushed his thin lips. I'm very satisfied with this way of expressing my thanks. Yi Qingluo's face suddenly flushed red. Dmo narrowed his peach blossom eyes, looked at her blushing face, chuckled lightly and drew closer. Do you know why you spent 3 days before you succeeded in your advancement? That scorching hot airflow poured down. Yi Qingluo felt a kind of electric shock. Her body was numb for a moment. The temperature was also rising. Not only her face was boiling hot, even her body started to heat up. She could tell that the displeasure in Dmo's tone was related to this advancement. Her delicate body trembled and moved slightly, trying to pull away the distance between her and Dmo Xian. However, the man had no intention of letting Yiqing Luo escape. His slender fingers traced the contours of her shoulders and circled around her black hair that was hanging down her shoulders. Her black hair was twined around her finger. From time to time, it would brush against her delicate skin. The tip of Yiqing Luo's ears were boiling hot. Her pink lips quivered, as if she understood the reason why Dmo Xian was angry. However, before she could open her mouth, Dmo Xian's hand suddenly wrapped around her body, and he suddenly scooped her up. In the hot spring, her naked body was pulled into the man's arms. The fragrant water soaked the man's luxurious purple robe. Her naked body was also tightly covered by the man's robe. Beside her ear was the man's cold and mocking voice. You need 3 days to successfully advance and wake up. This means that your advancement this time is not because of your strength, but because you have reached the opportunity to advance. Do you know the reason for your advancement? He suddenly lowered his voice, and his tone was slightly cold. How would Yiqing Luo not understand the meaning behind Dmo Xian's words? Her body trembled, and her little hand climbed onto the man's shirt, wanting to speak. Chapter 40-47. So, this time, you spent an entire 3 days to completely digest the energy in your body. The voice beside her ear was very low. The distance was very close. His breath was also very close. But Yiqing Luo had no romantic thoughts. With a start, her arm stretched out from the man's purple robe and circled around his neck, acting coquettishly. I know I'm wrong. It's my fault. I shouldn't have allowed the divine phoenix profound jade to absorb so much azure qi. This time's advancement. It was indeed taxing on her. She didn't expect that after releasing the divine phoenix profound jade's energy, the divine phoenix profound jade would be so happy with the azure qi, as if it couldn't wait to absorb all the qi in the spirit gathering array. Especially, finally, the third divine artifact automatically integrated into her body and signed a soul contract with her. Thus, she also inherited half of the third divine artifact's energy. She had just changed her body. How could she withstand the dual energy of the divine phoenix profound jade and the divine artifact? Luckily, Dmo Xian came just in time. Thinking of this, she suddenly raised her eyes slightly brightened, looking at his gaze, with some curiosity and some sparkles. Xian, your blood. Why can it suppress the energy in my body? The energy in her body settled down and slowly merged with her, allowing her to advance. She could be sure. It had something to do with the drop of blood that Dmo Xian fed into her mouth. Even at that time, her consciousness was already blurry because of the restless energy in her body. She could also roughly feel that when the man kissed her, that drop of blood slipped in. The young lady probably didn't know. This action of hers revealed so much. When the young lady lifted her jade lotus, the man only slightly lowered his eyes. He could clearly see the naked body under the purple robe in his arms. That delicate white skin instantly filled Dmo Xian's eyes. Dmo Xian's eyes dimmed even more. Indistinctly, there was a red glow of passion. He smiled, slightly lowered his eyes, smiling seductively. Want to know? Yiqing Luo nodded. Dmo Xian's smile deepened, his head tilted down a little. Their 4 eyes met. From this angle he could see the beauty of the young lady, in full view. His eyes flashed a dangerous deep meaning. His smile had a different meaning to it. The man's gaze was too scorching. How could Yiqing Luo not understand? She shrunk into the man's embrace to cover her body. Seeing her actions, Dmo Xian only smiled. That smile was dangerous and demonic. Not only did my blood prevent your body from exploding, it also allowed you to ascend to the Sage Profound 6th grade. How will you repay me? His low and hoarse voice was seductive and bewitching. He even deliberately lowered his voice to make it sound even more magnetic. Nestled in Dmo Xian's arms, Yiqing Luo felt her legs wobbling. Dmo Xian's brows curled up slightly as the corners of his eyes curled up. Why don't you pay with your body? As soon as he finished speaking, he kissed her. His warm lips seemed to want to devour her completely. Her black hair fell on her exposed skin. Yiqing Luo's breathing shuddered and became heavier. Her delicate body, which had shrunk under the purple robe, trembled slightly because of the man's seductive movements. The numb girl was still struggling. "You promised me that you wouldn't touch me during this period of time." Chapter 40-48. Yi Qingluo's beautiful face was stained with a thin shade of red. Her eyes were misty like spring water, already aroused. Her voice was like a hook, with a light pant. "You're now going back on your words." Dmo Xian suddenly stopped his actions. Half propped up on Yi Qingluo's body, their four eyes met. The man's deep as ink eyes were like a whirlpool, swallowing her whole. Just when Yi Qingluo was almost bewitched by Dmo Xian's deep peach blossom eyes. Dmo Xian's thin lips curled into a devilish smile. Plus that face. This smile, under this situation. It simply made one's whole body numb. Like an electric shock. Hasn't the imposter's matter been settled? Dmo Xian loved the expression of the person in his arms. He loved Lil Luo, the lovable look because of him. The fire in Dmo Xian's eyes burned even more. The young lady had no resistance. Already lying beside the hot spring, on the smooth huge stone, along with her purple robe. Yi Qingluo grabbed his wrist. The scorching heat seemed to be able to burn her. The scorching heat made her body heat up. What kind of solution is that? Yi Qingluo's eyes glowed brightly like stars, dazzling and resplendent. Dmo Xian suddenly lowered his body. The distance between the two was so close that the tip of their nose was touching. The imposter's identity is already clear. If he still has a brain, he will not use my identity to appear in front of the public. Dmo Xian explained with a reasonable attitude. Talking at such a close distance. His aura permeated everything about her. Dmo Xian's action was obviously to seduce her. Yi Qingluo almost couldn't control herself. The hand which was pressing on Dmo Xian's wrist tightened. I don't know who he is." The man suddenly bent his head, kissing her again. The slightly dangerous voice and overbearing action gave her no room to reject. "Is my charm not enough, or Lil Luo, or has already floated? What happened to liking my face? Why, my face is right in front of you. How can you still think of other men?" The punitive kiss, slightly heavy, even bit her. Yi Qingluo subconsciously moaned, crying out injustice in her heart. She was only curious who was the imposter of Dmo Xian. After all, he was able to imitate Dmo Xian to perfection. It was hard to find such a person in the world. How did pure curiosity turn into thinking about other men? Before she could explain herself, the man stopped her. The man moved his hands up and down as he said, "Besides, this is your way of repaying me, isn't it?" Yi Qingluo, who had been unconscious for an unknown period of time. She clenched her fists. Her whole body was sore, and she bit her lips angrily. Men were indeed all stinking liars. Men are all pig trotters. Men. Throw away the pig trotters. I don't want it anymore. Whoever wants it can take it. Yi Qingluo propped up her sore body and got up. Her body had already been cleaned up, and she was wearing neatly dressed undergarments. But Dmo Xian was nowhere to be seen. Yi Qingluo pursed her lips and gave a heavy humph. The previous few times, after torturing her, the system still knew to serve her. He had only served her a few times. But now he was gone. Men. Cough, cough, cough. In the room, an awkward cough was heard. Chapter 40-49. Although Old Man Song was ridiculing him, but in his heart, he was extremely happy. Her face was full of smiles. Girl Luo was really. Only in front of the venerable sovereign would she show her feminine side. Only then would she be more real. Old Man Song was truly rejoicing. For a Dmo Xian to appear by Yi Qingluo's side. He was also thankful from the bottom of his heart that Dmo Xian had appeared in Yi Qingluo's life. Old Song. Hearing Old Man Song's voice, the blush on Yi Qingluo's face stiffened. With a swish, her face turned even redder. "You. When did you come out?" Previously, her face was blushing. That was the color of spring. Now Yi Qingluo's cheeks were flushed red. Old Man Song's spiritual body floated over. Dizun has something to deal with. He'll be back in 2 hours. I'll stay here to watch over you. In other words, Old Man Song had been in the room for a long time. After she woke up, her heart was full of cursing Mo Xian's beastly behavior last night, totally not noticing it at all. She had lost all her face. Yi Qing Luo wanted to cover her face and howl. But when he saw Old Man Song's spiritual body, he was startled for a moment. What's going on with you? Why is your spirit body so weak? In the cave, Old Man Song's spirit body was still very sturdy. Why did he look so thin and transparent, as if a gust of wind could blow him away? Old Man Song lowered his head, raised his hands, and looked at himself. He smiled as he shook his head. It's nothing, it's just a little accident. I'll be able to recover after resting in the Azure Dew bracelet for a period of time. As he spoke, he floated to the side of the bed. Get up, Dizun has prepared lunch for you in the kitchen. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as the smile on her face faded and her expression turned grave. You are like this because of Xian? With Old Man Song's strength, plus the fact that he could enter and exit the Azure Dew bracelet at any time, how could he be injured by someone? Even his spirit body had become weak? Unless it was Old Man Song who volunteered. In addition, after Old Man Song heard her question, he didn't directly answer it, and even deliberately changed the topic. Yi Qing Luo was certain. The person who turned Old Man Song into such a state was definitely someone she knew. Then only Mo Xian could injure Old Man Song. After confirming this point, Yi Qing Luo went through the entire incident in her mind. He could also guess the reason why Mo Xian made a move against Old Man Song. Yi Qing Luo pursed her lips tightly and lowered her head guiltily. Old Man Song, I'm sorry. It was because of her that Mo Xian took action. Silly girl. Why are you apologizing to me? I don't blame you or the Overlord. Old Man Song stretched out his hand and made a gesture of slapping Yi Qing Luo's head across the air. He smiled helplessly and shook his head. You almost exploded and died because the power in your body was too strong. This is indeed my fault. Dizun should blame me. It's not your fault. Yi Qing Luo leaned against the headboard and lowered her eyes. I already have the whereabouts of the third divine relic. Naturally, I will not give up. Even if you don't tell me how to open the door of the passage, I will find a way to enter the enchantment of the divine relic. Furthermore, if I had been able to control the divine phoenix profound heart jade, I would not have been in such a dire situation. So in the end, it was all because of her greed that caused her to become like this. Old Man Song looked at Yi Qing Luo's slightly gloomy aura, and his eyes flashed with some emotion. Chapter 40-50. His tone was obviously a little apprehensive. He seemed to be suppressing some sort of emotion. Yi Qing Luo raised her eyes. Her bright as ink eyes quietly looked at Old Man Song. Those clean, pure eyes. This caused Old Man Song's heart to grow increasingly apprehensive. When he raised his head to meet Yi Qing Luo's gaze, he was rather cautious. Old Man Song, you know my personality very well, don't you? Yi Qing Luo's lips curled upwards as her brows carried a smile. I believe you. I should have told you these 4 words many times. He answered without hesitation. Just like in the cave, when he suggested for Yi Qing Luo to drip her blood into the eyes of the mural. Without any hesitation, he did as he was told. Just because Yi Qing Luo did it. That was why she was so close to bursting from the power, causing her body to explode and die. Actually, he had his own selfish motives. Old Man Song pursed his lips into a straight line. His aged face was filled with complicated emotions. The gaze he shot towards Yi Qing Luo was filled with guilt. Old Man Song's mood changed. Yi Qing Luo naturally felt it and saw it in her eyes. Old Man Song, will you hurt me? She was still smiling, and her eyes were gentle. Old Man Song didn't even think about it and reflexively replied, I won't. Yi Qing Luo smiled. Isn't that enough? No matter what secrets you want to hide, as long as you treat me sincerely, that's enough. She never doubted Old Man Song's sincerity towards her. All along, it had always been Old Man Song who was always by her side. Back then, he had even wanted to sacrifice himself to save her. So what if he had a lot of secrets? It was not important. The Azure Dew bracelet was no ordinary object. As the artifact spirit of the Azure Dew bracelet, How could it be an ordinary person? Since he had chosen to contract the Azure Dew bracelet, he chose Old Man Song. She would trust Old Man Song unconditionally. She believed it too. When her strength reached the level that Old Man Song approved of, Old Man Song would definitely take the initiative to tell her all the secrets. Las Luo. He had to admit that Yiqing Luo's words made his desolate heart feel a sense of warmth. He was a spiritual body. There is no heart. However, the warmth of his body and the uncontrollable shaking of his body were so real. Old Man Song let out a low laugh. His somewhat transparent, glowing hand covered his face, covering his slightly reddened eyes. He chuckled softly, as though he had finally let go of the boulder that had been weighing down on his heart. His voice was filled with ease. Hiding a secret. How did you detect it? It's very obvious. Yiqing Luo looked at him. Perhaps you've never thought of hiding it from me, isn't it? Indeed. Old Man Song let go of his hand and met Yiqing Luo's gaze. These matters will eventually have to be told to you. It's just that. Now is not the time. I know. Yiqing Luo had no intention to interrogate him. I believe in you, just like how you believe in me. That's enough. The smile on Old Man Song's face grew even wider. That old face was covered with a relaxed and sincere smile. Under this warm and kind smile, his spirit body slowly floated into the Azure Dew bracelet. Yiqing Luo lowered her eyes as she caressed the bracelet on her wrist and looked at it for a long time. Afterwards, she laughed lightly, lifted the quilt, and got up from the bed. Regarding Old Man Song, she didn't intend to question or satisfy her curiosity. The secret that Old Man Song was hiding was related to the sovereign of the divine emperors. Chapter 40-51. Old Man Song's attitude towards the divine emperor was very complicated. It was respect that emanated from his bones. Moreover, Old Man Song and the divine emperor's faces were filled with nostalgia. Presumably, Old Man Song was definitely acquainted with the divine emperor, and their relationship could definitely be considered close. To be able to have such a close relationship with someone as noble as the divine emperor, Old Man Song's identity wasn't simple either. She had previously said that she would think of a way to help Old Man Song recover his true body. And after that, the days ahead were probably going to be even more dangerous. These were all areas that she could not explore at the moment. Now he was still not strong enough. In the face of many things, he was still in a passive state. This time, it was her carelessness that allowed the palace of gloomy darkness to take advantage of them. Yiqing Luo slowly clenched her fists tightly. He felt the dark force in his body circulating through his limbs and bones. The smile at the corner of his mouth gradually became firm. She would work harder. Even more powerful. After washing up, Yiqing Luo ate the lunch that Dmo Xian had specially prepared for her. He strolled around the area for a while. Dmo Xian was nowhere to be seen. Wearing a veil, she sat on the first floor of the inn, drinking tea and listening to the gossip around her. She felt bored. Just as he was about to get up and return to his room, he heard someone from the next table say, "Do you guys think that the matter regarding the Empyrean Fairy in Shadowless City is true?" The person beside him said, "It must be true. If it was fake, the Overlord would have killed her already, wouldn't he?" That's right, that's the Overlord. If the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City had lied, would the Overlord allow her to live until now? Shadowless City's mysterious maiden. Overlord. These few words fell into Yiqing Luo's ears. The body that let her stand up slowly sat back down. Are these people talking about the real and fake venerable sovereign? It had already been a few days since the incident. Why were they still so interested in gossiping? She wanted to hear how the other citizens viewed the matter of Mu Qiulan and the impostor. In the past 3 days, Dmo Xian did not bring her back to the Qiao family. Instead, he found a small inn in the main city of Shadowless City. They were probably worried that she would take too long to level up and cause everyone to worry about her. So he didn't go back. He didn't expect to hear gossip about himself here. She overheard the gossip at the next table, and naturally, other people heard it as well. Immediately, the people at the other table came over and said, "The Overlord loves Madame D very much. He would never do anything to betray her. What deep is the ocean? That's just a show for us ordinary people. Otherwise, why would the Empyrean fairy of Shadowless City appear? There's no smoke without fire. If the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City really has nothing going on with the Overlord, how would she dare to say that she slept with the Overlord in front of him? The people at the other table were rebuked, and their expressions darkened. I'm afraid you guys don't know? I heard that a few days ago. There were two venerable sovereigns who looked exactly the same. The mysterious fairy of Shadowless City thought that the venerable sovereign who was related to her was actually a fake imposter? Why is it different from what I heard? The person sitting at the next table told him what he had heard. Isn't that imposter the Overlord's Lady Emperor's secret guard who deliberately pretended to be the Overlord in an attempt to ruin the reputation of Shadowless City's fairy? Chapter 4052. The boss of Jubao is Lady D's friend. Of course he would speak for Lady D. That's right, young man. You're still too naive. The person at the next table patted the shoulder of the person at the other table. Then he continued, and a few days ago, didn't the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City return to the Qiao mansion? It was Lady D's friends who brought her back personally. These days, the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City has been staying at the Qiao mansion. The Overlord is staying at the Qiao mansion. The mysterious fairy of Shadowless City has been brought to the Qiao mansion. But Lady D hasn't returned yet. What does this mean? It means Lady D is going to be replaced. The person at the next table clicked his tongue. Then he noticed that the person at the other table had an ugly look on his face. He pretended to be mysterious as he patted the person's shoulder and whispered, "Young man, since we're fated to meet today, I have a piece of news that no one else knows." Everyone's curiosity was piqued. The person at the next table gathered everyone together and whispered, "I heard. The Overlord is completely enraged because Lady D used a substitute to impersonate him, so he paused and purposely kept them in suspense. You must keep it a secret. Don't dawdle. Tell us." "So what? What happened?" Hearing the urgency in their voices, the person at the next table smiled in satisfaction and continued, "So, Lady D has been killed by the Overlord himself." What? The few of them cried out in shock. The person at the next table immediately covered their mouths. Shoo. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Their faces were full of shock and disbelief. That person tried to rope in the crowd again and continued in a low voice. "Don't doubt me, these words. I heard it from the Empyrean fairy of Shadowless City and her rich friends. Now His Majesty is looking for a suitable opportunity to make her the real Madam of the Emperor." Everyone looked at each other with different expressions. Gossip was one thing. It was one thing to think that the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City and the Overlord had something going on. But if the Overlord killed the Lady D and wanted to make the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City official, this didn't seem like something the Overlord would do. That was too much. Furthermore, if compared, the Imperial Lady's appearance, strength, and boldness were all above the mysterious fairy of Shadowless City. Abandoning the beautiful jade that was the monarch's wife, he chose the stone that was the mystic fairy of Shadowless City. Only an idiot would make such a decision, right? To be honest, I don't want to believe that the Overlord is such a person, but the truth is. The person at the next table shook his head and sighed. Just wait and see. You'll know in a few days. Is it true that the Empyrean maiden of Shadowless City said it herself? Someone asked. Of course, I heard it with my own ears when she said it to those ladies. That person patted his chest and said, "She said that the Imperial Madam is already dead, and she sounded so sure. How could this be false? If it was fake, wouldn't it be exposed when the Emperor's wife appeared? Since the mysterious lady of Shadowless City was so certain, it couldn't be false." The few of them sighed. For a moment, they didn't know what to say and just stared blankly at that person. Whereas Yi Qing Luo, who was eavesdropping on the gossip, her face under the veil twitched a few times, although the voices of those people were very soft. Chapter 4053. When did she die? Or was she killed by immersing personally? The people involved in this topic were all dumbstruck. She told a lie. She had to use numerous lies to cover it up. Mu Qiulan was addicted to lying to others. She even dared to say that she was killed by immersing personally. She was certain that she was dead. She thought that after she was brought away by the vines, she died in the West Cliff Mountain, that mountain which was filled with yin qi. Even if she was really dead, the title of Imperial Madam would not belong to her, Mu Qiulan. Mu Qiulan was really wishful thinking. Yi Qingluo sneered. Looked like she had to make a trip back to the Qiao residence. Let's see what kind of ridiculous joke Mu Qiulan could come up with. Yi Qingluo threw out a piece of crystal and placed it on the table as she got up and walked out of the inn. Look at that person. The few people who were gossiping at the next table were attracted by a flash of red. They only had time to see that slender back view. Her red dress fluttered and her temperament was otherworldly. Just a back view made one feel as though she was a nine heavens mysterious lady who had descended. That lady, when was she in this inn? Such an outstanding lady. They actually didn't notice her from the start till the end? Don't you feel that? That back view looks a little familiar? Red dress, otherworldly temperament, nine heavens mysterious lady. Why, I suddenly thought of Imperial Madam? Qiao residence. Mu Qiulan and a few young ladies stood at the entrance of the courtyard as their expressions were distorted and filled with rage. At the entrance of the courtyard stood two upright figures, a man and a woman. The man's expression was grave and stern and rigid. The woman's features were beautiful, elegant and otherworldly. At this moment, both of them raised one hand and blocked the entrance of the courtyard, blocking Mu Qiulan's path. You two lowly slaves. Don't you know who this sacred lady is? How dare you block this sacred lady's path? Mu Qiulan shouted angrily. The woman was expressionless as she replied calmly. This is the Overlord's order. Sacred lady is the Overlord's woman, and your future mistress. The young ladies beside Mu Qiulan straightened their backs as they sneered. The woman's eyes moved slightly but she remained expressionless. Imperial Palace's mistress, there's only Qingluo alone. You. Hearing the name Yi Qingluo, Mu Qiulan's expression sunk. Then he sneered and raised his head, revealing an arrogant smile. You're just a small secret guard of the Overlord. What right do you have to interfere with the Overlord's decisions? That's right, who do you think you are? Believe it or not, once the Holy Maiden becomes the Emperor's wife, the first person she will target is you. Get out of the way. The Holy Virgin is going to find His Majesty now. A few young misses clamored, pushing and shoving, wanting to escort Mu Qiulan out of the courtyard. The woman who intercepted him didn't move at all, and her expression didn't change in the slightest. I'm not qualified and neither are you. The few of them pushed and shoved, but he still couldn't leave the courtyard. The young ladies also knew that this seemingly delicate and elegant woman in front of them was not weak at all. They were afraid that they would not be able to gain any advantage. Mu Qiulan's expression darkened. She felt that she had lost her dignity in front of Lord Dizun's subordinates. She stared at the woman for a long time. Mu Qiulan's lips suddenly curled upwards, revealing a cold smile as she ridiculed. This sacred lady knows that your relationship with Yi Qingluo isn't bad, but some things, you have to accept the reality. Yi Qingluo she is already dead. Chapter 40-54. Mu Qiulan couldn't help but cover the corner of her mouth when she saw that the effect had been achieved. She chuckled. The person you want to curry favor with is no longer in this world. What's the point of pretending to be loyal? Humans should learn to be smarter and choose a good tree to nest in. If you curry favor with the wrong person, the consequences won't be light. Mocking words entered her ears one after another. The woman's gloomy face grew uglier. She clenched her fists. When she looked up again, her beautiful eyes were filled with endless coldness. She moved her fingers, and the wind from her palm slammed down on Mu Qiulan. Swish! The violent wind howled. Mu Qiulan didn't expect the woman to dare to make a move. The palm fell. No matter how fast her reaction was, that delicate cheek was also brushed by the wind from the palm. Bright red blood rolled down her face. Mu Qiulan let out a shrill scream and covered her face with her hands. The woman's palm missed, but she didn't intend to stop. She raised her hands again, and profound energy shot out. But before the palm could land on the ground, her wrist was suddenly grabbed by a hand. He stopped her attack. That wide palm carried a familiar warmth. The woman didn't need to look up to know who stopped her. Beiyuan. The man's deep voice sounded. He pulled the woman's hand and pressed it down. Don't mess around. That's right. The two people guarding the courtyard entrance were Tang Beiyuan and Lang Lixian. Her fiancé grabbed her wrist, and he had a don't mess around expression on his face. Tang Beiyuan's heart hurt as if it was being pricked by a needle. Seeing Tang Beiyuan being restrained, the few rich young ladies who were standing in front of Mu Qiulan, but felt guilty, heaved a sigh of relief. Mu Qiulan covered her face and looked at Tang Beiyuan with hatred and ruthlessness. What are you staring at? Believe it or not, I'll dig out your eyes. Tang Beiyuan's heart was burning with anger. Her arm struggled hard against Lang Lixian, and she vented her anger on Mu Qiulan. Lang Lixian held her hand even tighter, his face expressionless, and he didn't move. He was probably sure that Lang Lixian wouldn't let Tang Beiyuan do anything to him. Only then did Mu Qiulan relax. Looking at Tang Beiyuan's furious expression, a glint flashed across Mu Qiulan's eyes. I'll tell you another secret. The Madame D that you've been thinking about is not only dead, but she died in the hands of Lord Dizun. Do you know that? Nonsense. There was no way Tang Beiyuan would believe such nonsense. However, after listening to Mu Qiulan's confident rumor, Yi Zichen couldn't help but sigh. She couldn't help but want to tear Mu Qiulan's mouth apart. Lang Lixian, let go of me. Tang Beiyuan struggled, trying to break free from Lang Lixian's imprisonment. Lang Lixian frowned slightly. Don't mess around. Tang Beiyuan's nose turned sour. She did not know if it was Lang Lixian's attitude that had hurt her heart. Lang Lixian's strength was too great, and it hurt her. Mu Qiulan looked at the interaction between the two people in front of her, and the corners of her mouth curled into a proud smile. She looked at Lang Lixian. This holy lady admires smart people like you. After this holy lady becomes the Madame Dizun, I will definitely put in a good word for you in front of Lord Dizun. Lang Lixian frowned, but he ignored her. Instead, he kept staring at Tang Beiyuan's face. He looked at Tang Beiyuan's red eyes. He pursed his lips and wanted to say something. Suddenly, a clamor of shouting came from not far away. Chapter 40-55. Tang Beiyuan's expression was dark as she glanced at Lang Lixian. After Lang Lixian saw the housekeeper, he let go of her arm. But his body moved a few steps. It stood between her and Mu Qiulan. It was as if he was worried that she would suddenly attack Mu Qiulan. The sight of him protecting Mu Qiulan caused Tang Beiyuan's eyes to sting. She withdrew her gaze and suppressed the sourness in her heart. She took a deep breath and looked at the housekeeper. What happened? Those who are still in without embroiling city have all gathered at the Qiao Manor. They're all asking if Madame D is really dead. And they're all clamoring to see the Empyrean Fairy of Shadowless City. The butler immediately repeated, his face full of anxiety. The patriarch asked me to inform you that he might not be able to suppress it. Mistress is dead. Tang Beiyuan instinctively looked at Mu Qiulan. Earlier, Mu Qiulan had said delightfully and confidently, Yi Qingluo was already dead, and he died in the hands of Dmo Xian. How could Mu Qiulan be so sure that Yi Qingluo was dead? She didn't believe it. How could a lady like Yi Qingluo die so easily? Moreover, the overlord would rather die than to let Yi Qingluo suffer any harm. How could he possibly kill Yi Qingluo with his own hands? This must be Mu Qiulan's doing. Tang Beiyuan's eyes flickered as she looked at the butler. They've heard about the Lady Emperor's death. Why would they want to meet the Empyrean Fairy of Shadowless City? The butler wiped the sweat off his forehead and shook his head. This lowly one doesn't know either. Just as he was speaking, in front of them, about 20 people swarmed toward their courtyard. Walking at the forefront was the gloomy Qiao family head. It was obvious that he was infuriated by these major forces. When Mu Qiulan heard the butler's words, a sense of joy welled up in her heart. Then he saw more than 20 people from various factions rushing over. Moreover, they were all here for the matter of the Imperial Madam's death. She became even more excited. Who would have thought that the news would spread so quickly? She had purposely brought up the matter of Yi Qingluo being killed by Dmo Xian to the ladies in the morning. At this moment, it had already spread like wildfire. She could finally stand next to the overlord openly. Finally, she could hear everyone respectfully call her Madame D. This position should have belonged to her. As long as he could deal with this group of people in front of him. By then, even if Dmo Xian wanted to settle the scores, in order to maintain the overlord's reputation, he would have to obediently let her be the imperial madam. So what if Yi Qingluo wasn't killed by Dmo Xian? Anyway, Yi Qingluo was already dead, so the dead could not testify. No matter how Dmo Xian explained, he still had to bear the infamy of killing Yi Qingluo with his own hands. As for her, it had already come to this. The Linglong Palace would also give up on her after she lost her virginity to that impostor. She did not expect Dmo Xian to fall in love with her. Therefore, she did not need any feelings. She only needed the identity of the imperial concubine. That was enough. Just as Mu Qiulan was fantasizing about the bright future, Patriarch Qiao and more than 20 people from the major forces walked over. The events in Without Embroiling City came one after another. On top of that, Dizun was in Without Embroiling City. Another old man from the Huangfu family, one of the Heaven Realm's 4 great families, appeared. Chapter 4056. Because of this, those powerhouses who appeared in Mu Qiulan's courtyard all had rather high statuses in the various main cities. Patriarch Qiao. Tang Beiyuan's expression was solemn as she swept a glance at those 20 over people, and kept her emotions as she greeted Patriarch Qiao. Patriarch Qiao nodded and looked at Mu Qiulan with an unfriendly expression. Shadowless City's mysterious young lady. Today the entire Without Embroiling City is discussing a false rumor. May I know if you know about it? His tone was very stiff. It wasn't a question, but he was already certain that this rumor had something to do with Mu Qiulan. Hearing Patriarch Qiao's words, Mu Qiulan kept away the complacency in her eyes as she revealed an astonished expression. What rumor? The overlord was worried that I had suffered a shock in West Cliff Mountain. So he had asked me to stay in the Qiao residence to recuperate properly. I have never left the Qiao residence, so I don't know about the rumors outside. Her words revealed that she had a close relationship with Dmo Xian. Oh, really? Patriarch Qiao naturally didn't believe her. According to what I know, the overlord arranged for you to stay in the Qiao residence not to let you recuperate. Before the overlord left, he specially instructed me to watch your every move. He paused as his tone was filled with ridicule. This kind of reminder doesn't seem to be, because he was worried about you. Mu Qiulan had not expected Patriarch Qiao to directly tear down her stage. Instantly, her exquisite and beautiful face became a little twisted. However, when his gaze swept across the people behind Qiao family head and the various forces, Mu Qiulan suppressed the surging anger in her chest as she raised her head slightly and spoke without any change in expression. This sacred young lady knows that Patriarch Qiao admires Miss Yi very much, so you are unable to accept the overlord's choice. But since things have already developed to this stage, if Patriarch Qiao still wants to befriend the overlord, then you should see the reality clearly and accept this truth. She didn't reply Patriarch Qiao's words directly. Instead, she intentionally incited the crowd. With just a few words, he was clearly informing the crowd. Patriarch Qiao's words were merely a lie which he intentionally said for Yi Qingluo, reminding everyone again. The truth was right in front of them. If they wanted to befriend the overlord, then they should treat her as the new imperial madam. Perhaps she would also whisper pillow talk to Dizun and the others. It was indeed a little shocking for a woman to say such words. However, he had to admit it. His words struck a chord in the hearts of many people from various forces. The reason why they stayed in Without Embroiling City. Wasn't it all for Dizun? Even though Yi Qingluo had painstakingly saved the entire Earth domain at Without Embroiling City's auction. But their focus was still on the Dizun. Initially he thought that if he could get on Yi Qingluo's good side, he would be able to get on the overlord's good side. After all, the treasures gathering hall and the Qiao estate were like that. But he had not expected Yi Qingluo to have such a strong temperament at such a young age. Regardless of whether it was a temptation or a hint, Yi Qingluo didn't have any intention to deepen the relationship with them. Yi Qingluo's attitude was the overlord's attitude. For them, Yi Qingluo was just like the overlord. They were all pressuring existences. Now the emperor's wife had changed. It wasn't a bad choice. At least when facing the Empyrean Fairy of Shadowless City, they wouldn't have the feeling of empty tie pressing down on them until they couldn't breathe. Most importantly, the Empyrean Fairy of Shadowless City was different from Yi Qingluo. Yi Qingluo had no desires and no conditions could tempt her. Chapter 4057. As long as the conditions were set, Shadowless City's mysterious envy would definitely be able to reach a consensus with them. It would be much more convenient for them to make any transactions. Very quickly, some powerhouses asked in a probing manner, "I heard that Imperial Madam had died 3 days ago. Is this news true? How did you all?" Mu Qiulan's beautiful eyes widened as though she was extremely shocked as she subconsciously opened her mouth. The words were at the tip of her tongue when she seemed to have thought of something as she forced a smile. "Where did you hear this news from? Imperial Madam she? How could she possibly be dead?" Her expression, in addition to her words, that was an act of trying to cover up. Everyone's eyes flashed past a sliver of understanding as they continued asking, "Since Imperial Madam is fine, then why? Haven't we seen her for the past few days? If I didn't guess wrongly, these few days, the people at the auction house seem to be secretly searching for Imperial Madam, and the Overlord has also not been seen for the past few days." One must know that previously, Yi Qingluo was able to create new topics every day, making everyone discuss. But these 3 days, Yi Qingluo seemed to have suddenly disappeared. There was no news at all. Following that was today. The news of Yi Qingluo's death suddenly spread. This made the crowd doubt this rumor. The few powerhouses started another round of questioning. Mu Qiulan's face turned pale from the questioning as her gaze kept shifting back and forth on the crowd, as though she was panicking. After some time, she pursed her red lips tightly. "I believe everyone is very clear that Imperial Madam doesn't like me. The Overlord had arranged for me to stay in the Qiao residence these few days, and didn't ask Imperial Madam to find trouble with me, so the questions you asked, I don't know." The more Mu Qiulan said that, the more everyone felt that the news that they had heard was true. All of their gazes towards Mu Qiulan had some changes. If Mu Qiulan really became the next Imperial Madam, now was the time to hug Mu Qiulan's thigh. Everyone's gazes met and Patriarch Qiao saw it all. His expression instantly sunk terrifyingly. "Heh, what a good don't know. Shadowless City's mysterious envy. You're in my Qiao residence. Do you really think I don't know everything that you've done?" He sneered in anger. "You know better than anyone else how the news of Madame D's death got out, and made everyone know about it." A dark light flashed across Mu Qiulan's drooping eyes. The people from the various superpowers did not care about this at all. How did the news get out? It was not important. The important thing was this news true? Naturally, they knew very well that as the Empyrean Lady of Shadowless City, Mu Qiulan, who was related to the Overlord and had the potential to become the next Overlord's wife, how could she be a naive person? Mysterious Maiden of Shadowless City. We only want to know if this matter is true or false. Also, we also heard that the Emperor's wife was killed by the Overlord. Is this true? Mu Qiulan pondered for a moment. With Patriarch Qiao around, she could forget about pretending to be a White Lotus and removing all the blame from herself. Originally they thought that by pretending not to know anything and luring everyone to believe that Yi Qingluo was really dead. At that time, even if Di Zun were to blame him, he would not be able to do so. She could still feign ignorance. He was also innocent, and he had been dragged into this inexplicably. Chapter 4058. Mu Qiulan raised her head slightly. revealing her exquisite and beautiful face to the crowd. The expression on her face was no longer the flustered and stubborn expression of hiding the secret for Dmo Xian. Instead, her red lips curled into a proud smile. Yes, I can confirm that the imperial madam is dead. She slowed down her tone and enunciated each word clearly. Every word was like a clap of thunder, striking the hearts of the crowd. Nonsense. Tang Beiyuan's eyes reddened as she berated him. Mu Qiulan glanced at her, her smile widening. I was there at the scene, and I saw the imperial madam breathe her last with my own eyes. She paused, then smiled maliciously. You don't know how desperate Madame D was at that time. Unfortunately, she didn't even have the chance to struggle. She died, just like that. Mu Qiulan. Tang Beiyuan gritted her teeth. Her eyes were filled with anger as she spat out Mu Qiulan's name. She clenched her fists tightly, as if she was going to charge at Mu Qiulan in the next second. However, Lang Lixian was the first to grab her arm and pull her into his embrace. If this was any other time, Tang Beiyuan would definitely blush and her heart would palpitate. She would be so mesmerized that she would forget all her unhappiness and worries, and be filled with hope for their relationship once again. But at this moment, Tang Beiyuan felt cold all over. It was a bone-chilling coldness. She was angry. He was angry because of Yi Qingluo. It was not just loyalty to the matriarch. It was also because he cared about Yi Qingluo as a friend. However, Lang Lixian did not understand her. Clearly, he had believed Mu Qiulan's words. He really felt that there was a special relationship between Mu Qiulan and Lord Dizun. Therefore, as Dizun's most loyal secret guard, Dizun had no choice but to obey. He would protect Dizun unconditionally. No matter how much she hated Mu Qiulan, no matter how angry or frustrated she was, none of them could resist a single order from His Majesty. She probably didn't exist in his heart. Her insistence, her wishful thinking, in the end, felt like a joke. She let out a low laugh. His anger, and his desire to vent it on Mu Qiulan, all died down in an instant. She lowered her eyes, and silently leaned into Lang Lixian's embrace. His face was expressionless. The person in his arms quieted down, so quiet that it was a little strange. Lang Lixian frowned and looked down at Tang Beiyuan. Tang Beiyuan lowered her head, so her expression could not be seen. Lang Lixian only felt a little strange. Just as he was about to say something, he was interrupted by Mu Qiulan's voice. Very angry? Very angry? Do you want to kill me? Hee hee. So what if you kill this mysterious fairy? You still can't hide the truth, can you? Mu Qiulan's eyes were filled with a smug and flamboyant smile. He seemed to have seen through the relationship between Tang Beiyuan and Lang Lixian. She even deliberately provoked him. Furthermore, with that loyal dark guard around, even if you want to kill this mysterious fairy, you will have to see if he agrees or not. Tang Beiyuan didn't even lift her head. His emotions did not fluctuate or change in the slightest. She was so quiet. Lang Lixian couldn't help but lower his head to look at the person in his arms. His brows creased even tighter. Tang Beiyuan didn't respond and Mu Qiulan felt that it was pointless, so she hurriedly continued to bring the topic back to Yi Qingluo. This mysterious fairy has already said what you want to know. Now what other questions do you have? Chapter 4059. It was one thing to hear that Madame D was dead. It was a completely different matter to hear the relevant person admit it with his own ears. It felt completely different, okay? Shadowless City's Empyrean fairy's tone was so certain that she did not seem to be lying. After all, this kind of lie was too easy to expose. Moreover, if this matter was really fake, the Overlord and Yi Qingluo should have come out at the first instance to refute the rumors. Mu Qiulan raised her chin slightly and smiled haughtily. Every single rumor that has been spread out is true. She paused for a moment and deliberately slowed down her speech. Word by word, she said, including the news that Diforn was killed by Dizun. Everyone's expression changed unpredictably again. All of them were so shocked that they didn't know what to say. Madame D was dead. Moreover, Dizun had personally killed him. She had seen how much the Overlord doted on Madame D. No one could imagine the scene of His Majesty attacking Madame D. Have you ever wondered Who could kill a woman as powerful as the emperor's wife, who had treasures and terrifying battle pets, without giving her a chance to struggle? Muqiulan's smile widened. That's right. Muqiulan's smile widened. There was no one else but the overlord. This was the thought that flashed through everyone's mind. Looks like the rumors that he had heard were all true. I didn't expect the overlord to be such a heartless person. He was actually so ruthless. How heartless of him to turn hostile. But thinking about it, it made sense. People like Dizun, who were high and mighty. Who in the world could blaspheme him? In his eyes, women were merely an external object. Of course, none of this had anything to do with them. The overlord's gossip was not something that people like them could guess. I see. I didn't expect His Majesty to value Lady Mystic Fairy so much that he even killed His Majesty. Oh, even Lady Night for her. Ever since Miss Yi used the Overlord's substitute secret guard to impersonate the Overlord, I've felt that Miss Yi doesn't deserve the Overlord at all. Lord Mystic Fairy, congratulations. Looks like you'll be able to fulfill your wish in a few days. It was just a short period of silence. Immediately, people began to flatter him. With smiles on their faces, they cupped their fists at Muqiulan. She even moved closer to Muqiulan's direction. More than 20 people came over. At least more than half of the people gathered around Muqiulan. As for the other half, they were thinking about the consequences. Some of them were unable to believe that the Overlord was such a fickle and heartless person, and were unable to believe that Yi Qingluo, such a strong and confident person, would die so silently. Flattering words and Muqiulan's complacent laughter. All of them were provoking Patriarch Qiao. These people had no bottom line, no conscience at all. Inhumane. Yi Qingluo was considered as their savior. He was the benefactor who had saved the entire land. These people were indifferent towards Yi Qingluo. Human nature is cold and heartless. He Muqiulan's complacent and arrogant voice rang in his ears. Well said. Once I become the Empress, I will do my best to fulfill all of your requests. There's no need to thank me. Since the Overlord has chosen this mysterious fairy, this mysterious fairy should be the Overlord's right-hand man, and help the Overlord manage the Imperial Palace. Her complacent tone made it clear that she had already regarded herself as the future mistress of the Imperial Palace. Chapter 4060. That clapping sound at this juncture was extremely attention-grabbing. Everyone looked towards the direction of the sound. Immediately after, they saw a dazzling fiery figure appearing in front of everyone's eyes. The young lady clapped her hands as she walked in elegant steps, slowly walking closer. Her dress fluttered like a burning flame, even though the person who came was wearing a veil, concealing that devastatingly beautiful face. But when everyone saw the young lady in front of them, the first figure that appeared in their minds was Yi Qingluo. In this world, there was no one who could wear a simple red dress without any patterns, in such a dazzling manner. It made one totally unable to shift their gaze away. That was what everyone thought. Muqiulan was the same. The moment she saw the red-robed young lady appear, Muqiulan's mind instantly went blank, as though there was a buzzing sound reverberating in her ears. Her entire body turned stiff and cold, unable to move. It was Yi Qingluo. How could she possibly appear? Wasn't she already dead? She saw Yi Qingluo being taken away by the vines with her own eyes. She saw the Overlord leaving the West Cliff Mountain alone, with a heavy and sorrowful expression. Obviously, after searching for Yi Qingluo, there was nothing. Why was Yi Qingluo still alive? This was impossible. Numerous voices kept colliding in Muqiulan's mind. It was as if something was about to explode in his mind. You are. One of the forces stared at the young lady in front of them, taking the lead to break the deadlock. Everyone then reacted, as pairs of curious and puzzled gazes swept towards Yi Qingluo. Who am I? The young lady's clear voice, obviously carrying a smile, but when it entered everyone's ears, it made one's back inexplicably chilly. It was as if something cold was strangling his heart. The young lady was still laughing in a low voice. Her laughter was pleasing to the ears, like pearls falling onto a plate, extremely pleasant to listen to. But every single sound was like a huge rock, falling onto everyone's hearts. Actually, I'm also very curious, who should I be now? The young lady continued speaking, as her slender fair fingers gently placed on her veil, lightly tapping her pink lips, as her smile deepened. After all, in everyone's mouth, I'm already a dead person. The young girl's words were like a clap of thunder, striking everyone's hearts. Pairs of doubtful eyes turned into shock and disbelief. It was also faintly mixed with fear and panic. Your yi, Madam Emperor. Everyone's hearts trembled. The young girl tilted her head, and a strand of her fine black hair fell over her shoulder, making her look like a fairy who had mistakenly entered the mortal world. However, the words that came out of her mouth were chilling. Imperial Madam? Isn't the Madam D that everyone is looking for over there? How can a dead person like me bear the responsibility? She pointed at Mu Qiulan, who was standing there stiffly. Everyone couldn't help but shiver, their eyes filled with shock. This was absolutely Yi Qingluo herself. Other than the Overlord and Yi Qingluo, no one could make them feel so pressured. Those people from the forces who had flattered Mu Qiulan just now felt a chill run down their spines, and their bodies began to tremble. What they just said, apparently it had been transmitted to Yi Qingluo's ears. Oh no, they shouldn't have listened to Mu Qiulan's one-sided words just now. This time round he had completely offended Yi Qingluo. Chapter 4061. You stop trying to mystify us here. The young ladies beside Mu Qiulan heaved a sigh of relief as they pointed at the young lady and reprimanded her. Just a second ago, they were still enjoying everyone's fawning. The next second, they had become like a plague, an existence which they couldn't avoid. Mysterious Fairy had said that Yi Qingluo, that slut, was already dead. She was killed by the Overlord personally. The person in front of them was absolutely not Yi Qingluo. Someone must be trying to mystify us. Hearing the young lady's angry rebuke, Mu Qiulan also regained her senses from the shock. She froze her icy cold body as her hands clenched tightly. A pair of beautiful eyes stared at the young lady without blinking. She took a deep breath, trying her best to maintain the calmness in her voice as she said word by word. Who are you? What's your motive for impersonating the Overlord? She is definitely not Yi, not Overlord. Even the Overlord can be impersonated, not to mention the Overlord. Someone must have found out about the news of the Overlord's death, and intentionally came to impersonate the Overlord. The young ladies beside her immediately echoed in agreement. But the crowd didn't make a sound. Most of them hoped that what Mu Qiulan and the others said was true. If the person in front of them was impersonating the Overlord, their earlier act of hugging her thigh could still be saved. But logic and intuition told them clearly. The red-robed young lady in front of them wasn't fake. Heh. A light laugh was heard from under the veil. The young lady's brows rose as her long and narrow eyes outlined a seductive arc, unparalleled, peerless elegance. Every action, every smile, every frown were endlessly enchanting. Her footsteps moved slightly, step by step, as she walked towards Mu Qiulan. The surrounding people swiftly moved aside, opening up a pathway. Seeing the young lady getting closer to her, Mu Qiulan's entire body turned stiff, totally unable to move. The muscles on her entire body were so taut as though they were about to explode. Her eyes were filled with a terrified expression. What are you trying to do? You dare to make a move on me. The Overlord will not let you off. Mu Qiulan's voice was trembling. Yi Qingluo's lips curled lightly. Just this bit of guts and you dare to fabricate nonsense, playing with people's hearts? What nonsense? Everything I've said is true. You imposter. What intentions do you have by pretending to be the Imperial Madam? Even now Mu Qiulan still persisted in her dream. Yi Qingluo got closer to Mu Qiulan, and shocked her so much that she staggered a few steps backwards. His body was stiff and taut due to nervousness. This large movement made her unable to stand steadily, and she fell to the ground. A few young ladies immediately screamed, and helped her up. Yi Qingluo squinted at her contemptuously as her eyes were filled with ridicule. Then, What does mysterious maiden think? Do I feel at ease? Mu Qiulan swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The fear and panic in her eyes were obvious. Whatever mysterious maiden has to say, just go ahead and say it, I'm listening. Yiqing Luo smiled lightly. Mu Qiulan's face was pale. Under the gaze of the pair of eyes that seemed to be able to see through one's heart, she suddenly let out a shrill scream. She hugged her head, squatted down on the ground, and began to wail loudly. Clearly, his psychological defense had been completely destroyed. Yiqing Luo gave a light scoff as she slowly pulled away from Mu Qiulan. Whereas at this moment, Tang Beiyuan, who was nestled in Lang Lixian's arms, hung her head unmoving as she stared blankly at that red figure, as her eyes were filled with faint joy. Mistress, mistress. Chapter 4062. Yiqing Luo turned to Tang Beiyuan smilingly as she stretched out both her hands. Yuan, it's me. Tang Beiyuan's red lips pursed tightly as her eyes overflowed with joy. She immediately jogged over and pounced towards Yiqing Luo. But before she could get close to Yiqing Luo, her arm was grabbed by someone once again. Lang Lixian grabbed her wrist as his grave and stern face was solemn. Yuan, she is the imperial madam, don't be unreasonable. Tang Beiyuan's footsteps halted as her face turned slightly pale as she glanced sideways at the hand he was grabbing. That smiling face froze on her face. Let go. Her lips pursed even tighter. Lang Lixian frowned. You're angry? Tang Beiyuan suddenly laughed as she raised her head slightly and sneered at the man's solemn, handsome face. Her smile was full of sarcasm. You have always paid attention to the occasion, but now you're holding me like this. I'm afraid it's not good. Yuan, Lang Lixian's brows creased even tighter as his solemn expression added a heavy pressure for no reason. Tang Beiyuan swung her hand. Let go. Lang Lixian took a look at Yiqing Luo and looked down at Tang Beiyuan. Don't mess around. After this matter is over, tell me whatever anger you have in your heart. I'm not angry. Tang Beiyuan's red lips curled slightly as her other hand held onto Lang Lixian's hand as she tried to pry off his fingers. My relationship with the imperial madam doesn't need Hall Master Lang to worry about it. In order to maintain Hall Master Lang's upright and plain-spoken image, Hall Master Lang better not tug at me. Lang Lixian's dark eyes flashed a trace of astonishment. Just as he was about to say something, a fair hand swayed slightly in front of his eyes. A fair, slender hand rested on Tang Beiyuan's wrist. Lang Lixian raised his eyes and met with the young lady's bright eyes and white teeth. Hall Master Lang, you're hurting her. Yiqing Luo smiled as she spoke. In her smile, there was a trace of cold glint. Lang Lixian's pupils contracted as he swiftly moved his palm away and lowered his eyes as he respectfully greeted. Imperial Madam. Just like what Beiyuan said, Hall Master Lang doesn't need to worry about my relationship with Beiyuan. Yiqing Luo smiled as she pulled Tang Beiyuan into her arms. The woman's slender body was somewhat cold. Yiqing Luo gently caressed the back of Tang Beiyuan's hand, and then raised her eyes to look at Lang Lixian. Hall Master Lang, you can't treat your lover like a subordinate. Otherwise, why would you need your lover to do? Saying that, she pulled Tang Beiyuan and walked to the other side. Perhaps Beiyuan's status made Lang Lixian. Or it Lang Lixian didn't dare to ignore her. Lang Luo's words. Yiqing Luo pulled Tang Beiyuan as they walked a few steps further away. She then raised her eyes and shot a glance at Lang Lixian. You like him very much. The smile on Tang Beiyuan's face froze for a moment. She quickly adjusted her emotions and changed the topic with a smile. I knew you would be fine. Yiqing Luo didn't force her to reply as she raised her hand and tucked the stray strands of hair behind her ear before smiling. Aren't you afraid that I'm an imposter? Even Xian is impersonated, not to mention me? Yiqing Luo replied with a smile. Tang Beiyuan replied. The real can't be faked and the fake can't be real. If you carefully identify, how could you not recognize the fake? Tang Beiyuan said. The real can't be faked, and the fake can't be real. If you look carefully, how can you not recognize the fake? Both of them had no misgivings and didn't conceal their conversation at all. The two of them had no misgivings and didn't conceal their conversation at all. Everyone could clearly hear the hidden meaning behind his words. Wasn't this mocking them for treating an imposter as the real overlord? Chapter 4063. Everyone was drenched in cold sweat. Their minds were in a blank state from fright. There was no way for them to calm down and think about how to make Yiqing Luo believe them. You're back. Do you want to go over to the Treasure Exchange Hall to take a look? These few days, the boss of Treasure Exchange Hall is very worried about you. Tang Beiyuan looked at the surrounding people from various powerhouses who had a terrified look on their faces, and opened her mouth to suggest. With these people around, there were many things which were not convenient for them to say. Speaking of Treasure Exchange, Yiqing Luo nodded slightly. Naturally, I have to go over to take a look. Pei Sheng, that fellow, we agreed to head over to the Heaven Realm after the first Treasure Exchange auction. But he still hasn't gone over till now. Old Master Huangfu probably thought that I'm not willing to let him go. That day, they also went over to West Cliff Mountain and brought Shadowless City's mysterious maiden back. Tang Beiyuan explained. Shadowless City's mysterious maiden kept saying that the internal area of West Cliff Mountain is extremely dangerous, and going in would mean death, so they're all very worried about you. Tang Beiyuan smiled. These few days, Pei Sheng and the others frequently came over to the Qiao residence to inquire about Yiqing Luo and Dmo Xian's whereabouts. Adding on to the fact that Zhou Mo and Kitty Li were by the side chatting with them. Her relationship with Pei Sheng and the others was considered not bad. When Yiqing Luo heard that, her expression changed slightly. Let's head over to the Treasure Exchange Hall now. They already knew that she had met with danger in West Cliff Mountain, and the situation was perilous. She had gone missing for another 3 days. Adding on to the fact that the news of her death had spread like wildfire, Pei Sheng and the others were definitely getting more and more worried. Yiqing Luo took a look at Mu Qiulan, who was hugging her head as she squatted on the ground, totally disregarding her. She raised her eyes and looked at Qiao family's patriarch. I'll have to trouble Qiao family's patriarch to put in some effort over here. I'll head over to the Treasure Exchange Hall to report that I'm safe. After reminding her, she pulled Tang Beiyuan and was about to leave. Those people from various powerhouses who were crowding around immediately panicked. All of them immediately went up and carefully begged for mercy. Imperial Madam, it's us who have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai and listen to that slut's slanderous words. Earlier, what we said earlier wasn't our original intention. Imperial Madam is magnanimous. Please don't be calculative with us. Right. Madam, it's all that bitch's fault. She used His Majesty to fool us. We had no choice but to say those words. Madam D, please spare us, please spare us. Trembling cries for mercy rose and fell one after another. Those powerhouses who were crowding around Mu Qiulan earlier had all gathered in front of Yiqing Luo. But due to Yiqing Luo's imposing manner, he didn't dare to get too close. Their eyes were filled with pleading and longing. They had stayed in without embroiling city, because they wanted to build connections with the Divine Sovereign. Now that he had offended Madame D, he had offended His Majesty. If the main family found out, 3 layers of their skin would probably be peeled off. Thinking of the consequences, everyone trembled even more. Even his legs were trembling. Yiqing Luo was surrounded so tightly that not even a drop of water could seep through. She could only stop her footsteps as her charming eyes lightly swept past the circle of people in front of her. Her eyes were calm and indifferent. He didn't seem to have any special emotions. The more arrogant she appeared, the colder she became. Everyone's heart was beating more and more restlessly. Yiqing Luo's gaze was cold and chilly. After sweeping past everyone, her pink lips moved as she spoke in a lukewarm tone. Your mouths are on your body. I don't care what you want to say. Make way. Chapter 4064. Immediately, someone directly knelt down with a plunk sound. I know I'm in the wrong. Imperial Madam, please forgive my rudeness. Our powerhouses in future will definitely follow the Overlord's lead. That was a young man who looked like he was in his 20s. His face was filled with fear. To tell the truth, Yiqing Luo wasn't too interested in these people. From the bottom of her heart, she had no intention to get involved with any powerhouses. They fawned on Muchiolan and belittled her actions, but she didn't mind at all. But apparently, these cultivators who were feeling guilty were afraid that Yiqing Luo would take revenge on them because of this. Yiqing Luo felt that it was rather funny. They were obviously a bunch of elites who lived in the upper class, but they were easily incited by others. Like these powerhouses, she couldn't even be bothered about them. Imperial Madam. I was also forced. You can't do this. I've already apologized. I've already knelt on the ground to beg you. Why won't you forgive me? We were also forced to do this. Not of our own will. Everything is that slut's. That young man was kowtowing hard as he spoke. His entire face was filled with malevolence and distortion. Many powerhouses frowned when they heard this young man's words. They could tell that this was absolutely a small powerhouse which couldn't be shown in public. But no one stopped him. They allowed the young man to kneel on the ground and kowtow to beg for mercy. This was also everyone's way of using this young man to test Yiqing Luo's attitude. Yiqing Luo didn't express any attitude, but Tang Beiyuan, who was standing by the side, laughed out angrily. Forced? Who forced you? Who put a knife on your neck, forcing you to hug Muchiolan's thigh? Forced to do this? Stop joking, all right? Why are you the ones who were forced to do this? Then, where are those people? Why don't I see those powerhouses like you, flattering Muchiolan? As Tang Beiyuan said that, she pointed to those powerhouses who were standing beside Patriarch Qiao, who had not expressed any opinion from the start. Although these powerhouses stood on Yiqing Luo's side when Muchiolan was spouting nonsense, but they didn't stick to Muchiolan. Those people who were begging for mercy were reprimanded till their ears turned red as they lowered their heads in shame. Tang Beiyuan continued. Don't say things like apologizing means I will definitely forgive you. I'll kill you and then apologize to you. Do you accept? I. The young man was speechless from Tang Beiyuan's barrage of words. What? Don't you think I have to forgive you just because I apologize? Tang Beiyuan sneered. The young man blushed and did not answer. Yiqing Luo grabbed Tang Beiyuan's arm and said calmly, forget it, there's no need to waste time on him. Let's go gather the treasures. Tang Beiyuan glanced coldly at the young man, and didn't say a word as she walked forward with Yiqing Luo. Tang Beiyuan retorted. The people from the surrounding forces couldn't help but make way for them. No one dared to speak again. The young man who was kneeling on the ground slowly raised his head, looking at the two silhouettes that were leaving. Tang Beiyuan's sarcastic words rang in his ears. The young man's twisted and hideous face became even more terrifying. His eyes were filled with crazed killing intent. Chapter 40-65. The young man's sudden action, and that maniacal rage. All of them were caught unprepared. No one had expected that someone dared to make a move. For a moment, no one could react in time. The young man had already closed in on Yiqing Luo. His entire body exploded with a strong, profound glow. Was he going to self-destruct? Everyone realized the young man's intention as their expressions turned horrified. Subconsciously, they dodged to the sides. Upon sensing the young man's violent, profound glow, Tang Beiyuan had already rushed in front of Yiqing Luo in an attempt to help her block the young man's attack. Yuan, at the instance when Tang Beiyuan made her move, Lang Lixian's footsteps moved as he stretched out his hand to hold onto Tang Beiyuan's body. At the same time, the young man's crazy killing intent was right in front of her eyes. Yiqing Luo. What situation was this? Were they all rushing to their deaths? It was just a young man. Was there a need to be afraid that she couldn't evade? The two of them were blocking in front of her. It limited her damage output, all right. Just at the instance when the young man pounced over, a loud bang was heard as a heavy object landed on the ground. All of a sudden, an arc flashed before everyone's eyes, and something was sent flying backward. That heavy object fell heavily onto the ground with a miserable shriek. Dust filled the air as it slowly revealed the young man who was lying on the ground with a face filled with pain. And what attracted everyone's attention was a tall figure stood in front of the young man. His purple robe billowed, and as his sleeves fluttered, the air waves surged violently, emitting a majestic and powerful aura. Overlord, Overlord. Everyone's legs turned into jelly as they looked at the man high above as their hearts suddenly tightened. Overlord. The young man who was lying on the ground raised his head with a face filled with fear, trying to see the person's face clearly. But, just at the instance when he raised his head, his chest felt as though it was on fire. A large mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth. Following that, something seemed to be surging within his body. A loud bang was heard. His body suddenly exploded. Blood splattered and flesh splattered. Everyone held their breaths in shock by this scene. As for the man standing by the side, his peerlessly handsome face was icy cold, without any change in his emotions. No matter how the flesh and blood splattered in all directions, she had never touched a man. Xian. Then a clear and sweet voice rang out. The man, who seemed to be covered in frost, melted like ice and snow. His entire person became gentle. He turned around to look at the girl. The cold lines on the man's face softened. It was just a simple emotional change. Everyone could feel it. How much did the Overlord care about Yi Qing Luo? In this world, probably only Yi Qing Luo alone could affect the Overlord's emotions. How could they be so stupid, to believe Mu Qiulan's words? To believe that Lord Dizun would personally kill Imperial Madam? Why didn't you wait for me at the inn? Why did you run over here alone? Dmo Xian hugged the young lady's petite figure, as he gently caressed her hair. Yi Qing Luo glanced sideways at Mu Qiulan who was squatting on the ground, hugging his head, as her brows rose with a smile which didn't look like a smile. Here to see your little lover. What little lover? Dmo Xian didn't care how many pairs of eyes were watching them as he bent down and bit her lips. My little lover is only you. Chapter 4066. Yi Qing Luo was just teasing, but it made everyone's hearts lift up. Those powerhouses who originally hugged Mu Qiulan's thighs were even more terrified. They were afraid that Yi Qing Luo would expose them in the next second. But after Yi Qing Luo said that, she only leaned into Dmo Xian's arms and didn't say another word. Dmo Xian followed Yi Qing Luo's gaze as he calmly shot a glance at Mu Qiulan. There wasn't a single bit of warmth in his deep eyes. His thin lips moved slightly as his calm voice rang. Keeping her alive is because you want her alive. If you don't like her, just kill her. Dmo Xian's voice wasn't loud, but he was the man who attracted the most attention. Even though his voice wasn't loud, everyone held their breaths in concentration as they listened attentively. They wanted to find out Dmo Xian's attitude. After hearing this sentence, those powerhouses cultivators who believed Mu Qiulan's words earlier all turned pale. Overlord. Suddenly, Mu Qiulan, who was hugging her head squatting on the ground, suddenly raised her head and looked at Dmo Xian as her voice trembled. How could you? How could you be so heartless? Didn't like her, just kill her? In the Overlord's heart, what was she? Mu Qiulan looked at Dmo Xian in a daze as her eyes were filled with resentment and infatuation. Actually, towards Dmo Xian, other than his distinguished identity which attracted her, she truly liked him as a person. Why could he be so gentle towards Yi Qing Luo? But he couldn't give her this love? If that Overlord who was gentle to her and wanted to pledge his love to her was real, how good would that be? Mu Qiulan's thoughts were written clearly on her face, especially that blatant look in his eyes. Staring straight at Dmo Xian, Dmo Xian's expression sunk. Yi Qing Luo's figure moved slightly as she blocked in front of Dmo Xian and blocked Mu Qiulan's vision. Her lips curled into a smile as her expression was calm as she met Mu Qiulan's vengeful gaze and spoke calmly. Heartless? From the start, you're hugging an imposter, just your wishful thinking. You and Xian don't seem to have any feelings, so how can you say that you're heartless? It's all your fault, it's all your fault. Mu Qiulan screamed hysterically. If it wasn't for you, how could I have been fooled by an imposter? It's you, it's you. Yi Qing Luo scoffed lightly. He ignored Mu Qiulan. Mu Qiulan's mental defenses had obviously collapsed completely. Even her consciousness was in a mess. He was on the verge of going crazy. Now he had already dug out what she wanted everyone to hear from her mouth. There was no longer any meaning for Mu Qiulan to exist. She spared Mu Qiulan's life, But it was because of Dmo Xian's reputation. Now Mu Qiulan had personally admitted that the Lord Overlord, who was with her, was an imposter. That was enough. Ah Xian, let's go. Yi Qingluo held Dmo Xian's hand as she turned around and walked out of the courtyard. Naturally, no one dared to stop them and made way for them. As for Mu Qiulan, Yi Qingluo didn't need to specially remind her. There would also be someone to deal with Mu Qiulan. After all, Mu Qiulan's actions today had caused many forces to make the wrong choice. To show his loyalty, how could they possibly let Mu Qiulan off so easily? Whereas on the other side, Yi Qingluo and Dmo Xian's figures were about to disappear around the corner. Tang Beiyuan, who had been nestled in Lang Lixian's arms, finally reacted as she immediately pushed Lang Lixian, trying to chase up to Yi Qingluo's footsteps. Chapter 4067. The man's palm was scorching hot. Tang Beiyuan looked sideways at him. Lang Lixian's face was cold and stern. He said in a deep voice, "Since the Overlord has come, there is no need to follow." Tang Beiyuan pursed her lips and looked up at Lang Lixian. "Oh, then can you let go?" Listening to the woman's cold voice, Lang Lixian frowned in discomfort. "Yuan." He called out Tang Beiyuan's name, but he didn't know what to say. There was a moment of silence. Tang Beiyuan didn't wait for the man to continue. She moved her hand and broke free from the man's restraint. "If there's nothing else, please move aside." "Why are you angry?" Lang Lixian didn't let go. He pulled her in front of him, and their eyes met. "What have I done wrong? You should tell me." "Heh." Tang Beiyuan's smile was a little cold and her eyes were a little sore. "You didn't do anything wrong. It's all my fault, so please let go of me." "Stop messing around, okay?" Lang Lixian somewhat helplessly pressed his eyebrows. "It's not easy for us to go on a mission together. Good, okay?" Tears welled up in Tang Beiyuan's eyes. Her eyelashes were slightly wet. He also knew. Wasn't it rare for them to be on a mission together? He also knew that they could only be together for a long time when they were on a mission together. He actually knew everything. Tang Beiyuan closed her eyes and said weakly, "I don't want to mess around. I'm really tired. Let go of me. I want to go back to my room and rest." "All right." Lang Lixian didn't hesitate and responded in a calm voice. As he spoke, he loosened his grip. The moment the scorching hot hand left his wrist, Tang Beiyuan's heart felt as if it had been pierced by a needle. The pain was unbearable. She clenched her fists and suppressed the surging emotions in her heart. He was about to turn around and leave. The next moment, her body felt light. She had already fallen into a broad embrace. She was startled and her body stiffened. Above her head, the man's deep and solemn voice floated down. "If you're tired, lie in my arms and rest for a while. I'll send you back to your room." Lang Lixian carried her and walked step by step towards Tang Beiyuan's room. His steps were steady. Tang Beiyuan didn't feel uncomfortable at all when she was nestled in his arms. Her eyelashes fluttered. He looked up at Lang Lixian's chin. He stared for a long time. Finally, she closed her eyes and buried her head in his chest. Treasures Exchange Hall. Yi Qingluo and Dmo Xian had just arrived. He saw Pei Sheng and the others rushing out of the treasure-gathering hall. Lao Lai was still shouting from behind, "Close the door of the treasure-gathering hall first." However, no one paid attention to old Lai. The group of people rushed forward impatiently with anxious expressions. Even when it swept past Yi Qingluo and Dmo Xian, they didn't notice it at all. Instead, it was the expressionless Gui Wu who was following behind Pei Sheng. His eyes moved slightly as his gaze swept past Yi Qingluo and stopped in his tracks. "Sister." Kitty Li caught a whiff of Yi Qingluo's scent, and on seeing the young lady standing not too far away, she was looking at her with a light smile. His entire body almost flew over and rushed into Yi Qingluo's arms. The kitten's eyes were wet with tears. Her hands hugged Yi Qingluo tightly as her voice trembled. "Sister, you're finally back. You're finally back. I thought, you really didn't want me anymore." Chapter 4068. Because of Kitty Lee's cry, the two people who were still rushing ahead stopped in their tracks. Pei Sheng turned back and saw the young lady who was tightly hugged by Kitty Lee. A look of joy appeared in his eyes. He rushed over and stood in front of Yi Qing Luo, looking her up and down with excitement. "Ah, Luo, you're all right, you're back." Yi Qing Luo smiled and nodded. "Yes, I'm fine, I'm back." Where have you been these few days? Why couldn't Kitty Lee sense your presence?" Pei Sheng was so excited that he wanted to hug Yi Qing Luo. But a cold gaze swept past him. His movements suddenly froze. That action of wanting to hug or not, froze on the spot. Very funny. Everyone couldn't help but burst out laughing. Yi Qing Luo took the initiative to lean over and gave him a gentle hug. The action was very fast and not considered close. But when Yi Qing Luo had just pulled away from Pei Sheng, with one hand, he scooped her up and pressed her into his embrace. A somewhat cold gaze fell on her. Yi Qing Luo smiled, circled his neck and directly kissed his face. "Be good." After a perfunctory stroke, Yi Qing Luo looked at Pei Sheng. "I met with some accidents in the western cliff mountain. Xian accompanied me to recuperate these few days. Today I've recovered, so I came over to look for you." "Accidents? Then have you recovered?" Gu Zishi looked at Yi Qing Luo worriedly. "I can take a look for you. I'm fine, really fine, don't worry, Xian is taking care of me, don't worry." Yi Qing Luo shook her head. Gue Wu, who had been silent, stared at Yi Qing Luo. A trace of admiration flashed past his dark eyes. "This time the accident in the western cliff mountain, on the contrary, made you advance to the next level." Yi Qing Luo was slightly stunned. Her heart was slightly surprised. She didn't expect Gue Wu to be able to see the change in her aura. Gue Wu's strength, how strong was he exactly? Advanced to the next level? Luo advanced again? What accident did you meet in the western cliff mountain? Pei Sheng asked in surprise. "It's very dangerous over there. If it weren't for Xian, I might have died there, let alone leveling up. So, don't even think about taking the risk." Yi Qing Luo's warning destroyed Pei Sheng's thoughts as she changed the topic with a smile. "How long has it been? Why haven't you gone to the heaven realm? Later, old Master Huangfu will say that I'm not willing to let him go again." Pei Sheng scratched his head. "I'm just worried about you. So many things have happened. How can I go to the heaven realm with peace of mind? Now that I'm fine, you guys should get ready." Yi Qing Luo walked towards the direction of the treasure-gathering exchange as she said, "Go to your maternal grandfather in peace, don't worry about me." Pei Sheng glanced at Gu Zishi. The excitement and joy on her face were gone. He lowered his head, and a dark golden flowing light faintly appeared. "I want to stay in the land for a period of time. After that, I will go to the Huangfu family." "For me?" Yi Qing Luo saw through Pei Sheng's plan and couldn't help but laughed. "What do you think will happen to me? Over at Mu Qiulan's side, she can't stir up any waves. Moreover, everyone is here, so you don't need to worry." Pei Sheng pursed his lips tightly. He had been thinking for a very, very long time during the few days when Yi Qing Luo disappeared. It was Yi Qing Luo's arrival that changed his fate. It was Yi Qing Luo who made him stand up again and pull himself together. Chapter 4069. He was now able to protect the treasures exchange hall and live such a comfortable life. Everything was because of Yi Qing Luo. If anything happened to Yi Qing Luo, he would never be able to forgive himself. He had yet to repay Yi Qing Luo's kindness, so how could he leave the earth realm in peace and head towards the heaven realm to search for his own future? Even if Pei Sheng had grown up. However, the sentimentality in his bones could not be corrected in a short period of time. Yi Qing Luo could tell what Pei Sheng was thinking about with just one look. "After Earth Realm's matters are settled, I will head over to Heaven Realm." Yi Qing Luo's lips curled as she laughed lightly. "So you and Zishi go over there and wait for me first." Pei Sheng's expression froze. He wanted to say something else. But Yi Qing Luo was the first to speak. "You guys go over first and make good use of this opportunity. After you've stabilized your footing in the Huangfu family, when I go to the Heaven Realm, you can take care of me. Isn't that right?" Yi Qing Luo's words successfully blocked Pei Sheng's words. Alright, since Aluo has said so, don't think too much about it. Gu Zishi held onto Pei Sheng's arm and said gently, if we really want to thank Aluo, we can wait for Aluo in the heaven realm. When Aluo reaches the heaven realm, we can become her backing. Yes, that's what I mean. Yi Qing Luo snapped her fingers. Whether I can do whatever I want in the heaven realm in the future depends on you. The minute Yi Qing Luo's words came out, it made the surrounding few people couldn't help but burst out laughing. At the same time, in the Qiao mansion, Qiao family had dismissed all the people from those forces. Even the few young ladies who followed Mu Qiulan were forcefully called as guards by Patriarch Qiao and thrown out of the Qiao mansion. After that, he ordered the servants to carry Mu Qiulan back to her room. Mu Qiulan's emotions were very abnormal. He kept hugging his head, screaming and struggling. After all, she was the Empyrean fairy of Shadowless City. When she went berserk, the servants of Qiao Manor were unable to get close to Mu Qiulan at all. Instead, they were severely wounded. In the end, it was Lang Lixian who came forward and directly struck Mu Qiulan with his palm. This palm strike did not knock Mu Qiulan out, but she had lost her strength and collapsed to the ground. Lang Lixian's stern face revealed a trace of astonishment. He was surprised that his palm strike had failed to knock Mu Qiulan unconscious. However, he did not think too much about it. He lifted Mu Qiulan up as if she was a piece of trash, and threw her into her room. A hard lock locked the door tightly. Lang Lixian raised his hand. His palm was enveloped in a layer of dark force. That layer of profound energy followed Lang Lixian's hand, and slowly fell onto the lock. It formed a protective shield. Hall Master Lang, go and take care of Hall Master Tang first. I will have people look after this place. Qiao family had cupped his hands towards Lang Lixian. Lang Lixian was about to refuse. But, just as the words were about to come out of his mouth, in his mind, Tang Beiyuan's face, which was clearly smiling but was filled with endless sorrow, appeared. There was a dull pain in her heart. He slowly clenched his fist. He looked at the tightly shut door, then looked at the lock that was shrouded in profound energy. Unless someone with a higher rank than him appeared, only then could he open this door. Finally, he nodded and replied, then I'll have to trouble Patriarch Qiao. This was Lang Lixian's first time, putting Dmo Xian's instructions second. His heart was filled with thoughts of Tang Beiyuan's face, and that smile at the corner of her mouth, that pierced his heart. But he did not know. Not long after he left for Tang Beiyuan's courtyard, a wisp of black smoke slowly floated into the tightly shut door. Chapter 40-70. In the room, Mu Qiulan laid on the bed. Her entire body was in pain, making her body kept on trembling lightly. Her forehead was oozing with cold sweat. Because of the intense pain, her malevolent expression was distorted to the extreme. Her breathing was very heavy. That palm of Lang Lixian just now could practically take her life. Her entire body was in so much pain that she wanted to faint directly. But she was very clear in her heart. She had no way to faint. Because in the West Cliff Mountain, that medicinal pill which Yi Qing Luo threw to her made her consciousness maintain a clear mind forever. Even if she slept, she would not be able to sleep peacefully. She believed. Even if she died now, perhaps they would clearly feel how they were dying bit by bit. Mu Qiulan's heart was filled with hatred. Suddenly, the entire room sunk into a kind of December day atmosphere. The bone-chilling cold made her entire body shiver. You trash! An icy cold voice rang beside her ear. That voice was very pleasant to listen to, but it was wrapped in a deep chill. Hearing it made one shiver even though it wasn't cold. The moment that voice rang, Mu Qiulan, who was originally lying on the bed, almost unable to move, suddenly sat up straight, as her face was filled with terror as she looked in front. It was a sudden movement, made her body, emitted an intense tearing pain, as though someone had dismantled it, and then reassembled it back together. She was in so much pain that she was drenched in cold sweat, as she panted heavily, but her gaze had always been looking in front. You. In the air, a wisp of black smoke faintly appeared. The smoke curled up, as it revolved and floated. Gradually, a slender figure, appeared indistinctly in the black smoke. The black smoke was thick, and that person's face could not be seen clearly. She could only faintly see, under the black smoke. That person's eyes were like a venomous snake. Muchyolan's face was filled with terror, as her hands clutched tightly onto the blanket beneath her. In the black smoke, the figure's lips curled into a cold smile, as his voice was extremely sinister. Helping you with all the details, arranging everything properly, and actually managing things to such a state. Tell me, are you a trash? That person's tone was full of mockery and disdain. However, Muchyolan didn't dare to reveal the slightest bit of displeasure. She didn't have her usual lofty and unconvinced demeanor. She shrunk her neck and trembled uncontrollably. I am sorry. I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want to. In order for you to drive a wedge between God Monarch and that SL*T, he gave you the jade pendant. Now that the jade pendant is gone, their relationship has become even better. That person chuckled as he spoke of the things that Muchyolan had failed to accomplish. His tone was calm, and it did not seem like he was questioning or blaming her at all. But this was the case. The more Muchyolan sensed the approaching danger. He wanted to explain, but his tongue was curled up in fright. His teeth were chattering, and he couldn't utter a single word. Idiot. You can't even recognize the real venerable sovereign, and you still treat an impostor as your true love. You're really stupid. Mentioning this, the man's tone was obviously a little more angry. She suddenly flicked her sleeve. The ball of black smoke swiftly attacked Muchyolan's direction. The smoke instantly wrapped around Muchyolan's neck. It lifted her up into the air. Muchyolan widened her eyes, begging for mercy in fright and unwillingness. That person sneered. As he laughed, the black smoke became thicker and thicker. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.